Welcome everyone. It's called a special meeting of the Lake Mills Park Board to order. Does everyone have an agenda in front of them, either paper or electronic?
Yes. Yeah.
So the agenda, I'll read it out, then we'll go actually into it. But call to order, then we'll do our roll call. We'll welcome Mary Schmoeger, our City Council liaison, I should say. Parks Board member introduction, so you kind of get to know our backgrounds. Then we'll go to our guests and any presenters that may be here. We'll go over the Parks Board minutes, and we'll go over the director's report, and we'll go through some public comments, including emails, and then the new business, which is discussion and recommendation for fulfilling the City Council Resolution 2341A regarding the maintenance and preservation of the mill pond. Then discussion recommendation creating a presentation for the June City Council meeting, discussion of the Sandy Beach restaurant details, discussion of attendance of these meetings and absence, also the day and time of our regular meetings. I don't know if that's been brought to the new members, but we may be moving the time and the date, so be aware of that. Then there's announcements, recommendations for future agendas, and then our adjournment. So to go back, let's do a roll call. Mike, would you start, please?
Mike Niesman, present.
Mary Schmoeger, present.
Anita Martin, present.
Gray Baker, present.
Tim Sprecher, present. And so 3, welcome to Mary Schmoeger. So thank you. Some of you don't know that. Mary used to be my big boss when I worked at American Family. So
I guess I didn't realize that.
What's that?
I didn't realize that.
Oh yes. So we've
Many
known
years
each-
ago.
Yeah,
Many years ago.
Yes, it's got to be at least 20.
I thought you were going to say you babysat her.
Well,
Sorry,
I'm not
cheap
going to
shot.
say anything appropriate.
Cheap shot.
Mary, it is totally appropriate to use sharp elbows. So yes, and then let's do our Parks Board introduction. So Mike, would you start to say a little who you are, how long you maybe lived in Lake Mills, and what your background is?
Mike Niesman. My background for Lake Mills, I married someone from Lake Mills. We were in the Foreign Service overseas for 28 years, and then when we retired, we came to Lake Mills. So, glad to be here.
Thank you. Mary?
Well, I've been in Lake Mills for coming on 9 years, and I am a new City Council member. I'm 1 month in, and I'm very excited to be a part of the Parks Board.
Congratulations on your
Thank you.
election.
I'm Anita Martin. We've lived in Lake Mills since 2001. Originally, my field was healthcare, and then I kind of switched directions and did writing and editing. For the past 4 years, I've been on the county board for District 13. My interest includes environmental issues related to the lake and the pond.
Thank you, Nina.
I'm Gray Baker. My wife and I moved to Lake Mills, I believe 4 years ago now. We live on East Lake Street over by the Doyle's Dog hot dog stand. Professionally, I'm a drinking water engineer. I work for the state. Yeah. Been on the Parks Board a year, I think, now.
Is it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Tim Sprecher, been in Lake Mills since 1996, and we live on the south end of town by the golf course, and I've been involved with the Parks Board for a couple of decades. I'm not even a guest, Mike, but been here a while. So, guests and presenters, do we have any people that are going to present? Colton, are you going to present, or?
Not presenting, just answering any questions you might have about stuff.
All right. And anyone else? Okay. We asked, so if you are going to present or you want to make a comment, we're going to have to come up here, sign in with your address and name and such, and we'll use that microphone up there so you're able to be heard as this is recorded and being presented. So thank you very much. So let's move to number 6 on the agenda, Parks Board minutes. Review and approval of the regular meeting minutes of 17 April. And then that's it. Yep. So any comments on the minutes. I believe we have, what, 6 pages, Mike?
That's counting Eric's. They're
Oh.
not all my verbiage.
Okay.
I'd like to say I do really like having the video. It really makes it a lot easier to make sure you've got things accurately.
We should have also agenda item timestamps on it as well moving forward.
Right, and you can hit the tab, basically. It's great.
I know we're a little late now, but were we supposed to do the clap? Too late?
Can I ask a question? Is the video pointing to the audience or is it pointing to
Both.
you guys?
We have 2
Oh, you
cameras.
guys.
Yep.
I don't think I have any edits.
Yeah, I reviewed them. I thought they were very nice and thorough.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Any other comments, corrections and such to the meeting minutes? Or to the Appendix 1, the Facilities and Grounds Director's Report from April 17th? If not, might I get a motion to approve the minutes and appendix?
I will motion to approve.
All right, and a second?
Second.
Anita, thank you. Then let's move to the Parks and Forestry Director's Report, including the Anita and Mary updating process, which Eric was so generous to
Excuse me, Tim,
provide.
do we have to vote officially?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Yes, so do we have a vote on the motion and to approve? Mike?
Aye.
Aye. Mary?
I'm going to abstain. I was not present.
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
Aye.
Hey.
Aye. Thank you. So, Mr. Eric,
Floor is mine.
floor is yours.
Well, last week, both Dan Drescher and I, Mary and Anita, took the time to meet, and we went over all of the documents, presentations, etc., that have been presented thus far, with the source document being the 2018 Strand feasibility study for dredging of the mill pond. We went over some questions that both of them had, as well as what the Parks Board has discussed thus far. Now, I don't want to speak for the Parks Board, so if they have any questions, I do implore you guys to ask any questions for any of the other Parks Board members that are here. But went over all of the historical photos and anything that has been basically agenda attachment items since the Parks Board has been assigned the actual resolution from the City Council. Now, I do know Anita attended the Joint Rock Lake Committee meeting where Colton presented the Mill Pond Ecology Report at that point. Now, I did provide like supplemental documentation, the actual PowerPoint to Mary as well. But if there's any questions, Colton is here to answer any of those as well if he's available regarding the ecology of the mill pond. But hopefully I answered a lot of questions that you guys have regarding what the Parks Board has discussed thus far. And again, I would like to say that if you have any questions for Parks Board members regarding their opinions or some of the things that are moving forward or kind of the direction they're moving, I would implore you to discuss it at one of the upcoming agenda items that's coming up in the meeting, and hopefully you guys have a good background of the understanding. So,
Just for point of clarification, you mentioned Dan Drescher. Dan Drescher, for people that might not be aware,
yep, city attorney.
is a city attorney.
Yep.
So we have that. And then for the presentation to the Rock Lake Improvement Association, what was the date of that?
The Joint Rock Lake Committee?
Yes.
I would have to look back at the agendas to recall what the actual date was. I believe it was it last week? I think it was last week. Just a couple days prior to our meeting, I think, Anita. But I'd have to look back at the
Okay,
agendas.
good,
to see
but
when it was.
recent.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
recently.
Very,
Yeah.
very recent to the updating of the mill pond topic.
All right, thank you.
But
May I ask, sorry, was there any feedback from the Joint Rock Lake Committee? Did you get a sense of their feelings on it? Or,
I think they do know that the Parks Board is tasked with this, and they're interested in the topic in and of itself. But regarding involvement, I don't think it necessarily is at the point of Joint Rock Lake
Okay.
involvement at this point.
Okay.
I do expect there to be some comment from the Joint Rock Lake Committee post City Council, I suppose, or Parks Board recommendation to City Council. But I haven't really heard one way or the other as far as favoring either option or the other at Joint Rock Lake for this point. That being said, I'll just go over a couple highlights within the May Director's Report, and if you have any questions at that point, I'm more than happy to highlight. We've had several heavy windstorms throughout this spring already, one of which was last night. I apologize for my appearance at this point, but it's been one heck of a day doing storm cleanup, but it could have been much better, and we got very lucky with what we did have. But we have had substantial storm damage within the month of May. The biggest issue that we have right now is the month of May is normally before we have the majority of our summer season staff on duty. And right now we're experiencing substantial amounts of growth. And what I mean by growth, that's our lawn mowing and weed whacking at all of our properties. So without our summer seasonal staff, we've definitely been struggling to keep up, especially with our athletic fields. But we're doing what we can. Definitely appreciate the one part-time member we do have on staff, who's a retired gentleman and does a fantastic job for us, definitely keeping us afloat. The rest of the month has definitely been dedicated to our parks preparations. May is the month dedicated to changing of the seasons. And when I say that, it's our shifting of our priorities from forestry operations in the dormant season to our parks operations during the busy seasons. As you know, weather's been pretty favorable within the past couple weeks, or months I should say, so it's definitely an early start to summer. So we've been doing what we can to get everything prepped and ready to go. That being said, I feel like we are no longer in spring, we are in full-fledged summer at this point, with all of our flower bed volunteer staff all signed up and definitely performing substantial amounts of work and doing a fantastic effort. When I talk about parks preparations, it is the setting up of our picnic tables, our shelter reservations, our athletic field usage, mostly softball and baseball diamond usage, our general beach cleanup, swim line installation, pier installation is a large aspect of that as well. But staff have been working very hard to get that stuff done prior to Memorial Day. So I definitely appreciate all of their involvement to it. Now, part-time staff will all be on duty after Memorial Day. That will be the Tuesday after Memorial Day, which we'll very much look forward to. Gatehouse staff will be starting collecting entrance fees at Sandy Beach this Friday. We're going to have a bit of a mixed staff and availability until after Memorial Day, but we will have the gatehouse staffed at Sandy Beach. Now, we do not collect entrance fees at Sandy Beach unless there's a gatehouse attendant on staff, so we do try to staff that as much as possible during park operations hours. And we will begin water quality testing at all of the beaches and public access points starting Friday. Now, I will say there's approximately a 24-hour gap from when those samples are collected to when we receive the results. At this point, the beaches are not signed for water quality until we know what the results are. So most likely Saturday afternoon, we'll be posting what our water quality advisory signage is at the beaches. Surf Shack Rentals is in operation at Sandy Beach for the second annual season, which is nice to see. The next two largest updates that I have is pickleball courts at Rotary have been surfaced at this point. So the large donation from Rotary Club, amongst many others, has been completed. There's a 72-hour cure time for that surfacing. I am going to be opening up the courts for play for Memorial Day weekend, just because there's going to be a couple week gap for the concrete concrete contractors to install the footings. So I'd like to at least make it available for people to play. They will still have to bring their portable nets for the time being, and I'll just have to close it off again for a couple days once we do have the concrete installed. But that was a nice, unexpected, I suppose, move for the surfacers to actually install that. I'm looking at probably the second week in June will be total operation is what I'm expecting at this point. The next thing is the Sandy Beach restaurant. We have had, city staff have had 2 meetings as well as the restaurant tours. Garver Events LLC have had 2 meetings with Thrive Architects so far. The next meeting is scheduled for May 29th, which is next week. There were a couple options that were provided by Thrive Architects to staff and the restaurateurs last week, of which we kind of designated some of our priorities, which we can discuss later as well. Kind of generally what we've seen in public surveys, what we think public generally would like to see in a restaurant facility at that point. And they're bringing back a more, I suppose, cleaned up design next week, and we're going to see where that progresses to. But the trailer park is in full operation, almost near full occupation at this point, or inhabitants. There's a lot of trailer park residents who are up there just because, again, season is nice and warm, so people are inhabiting their vacation homes. But if you have any questions at this point, I'm more than happy to answer.
This follow-up meeting on May 29th, is that part of the city council meeting, or what, where, and when is that meeting?
So that is just for city staff and the restaurateurs, which is Garver Events LLC. Once there's been a preliminary design that's sufficient for the restaurateurs, I believe at that point it's going to be presented to city council. So the actual design of the restaurant is at the point of city council involvement currently, but more than happy to discuss. So we have further agenda items, but I did hear some of the criticisms regarding Bartles Beach and some of the other actual staffing and custodial duties regarding the parks. I know we can bring that up in public comments as well, but for your information, we normally start weekend custodial staff on Memorial Day weekend. It's normally followed from Memorial Day to Labor Day, although we extend it into or beyond Labor Day if needed. This happened to be the weekend to where we had 80-some degree weather, and we had not yet had weekend staff on duty. So normally those weekend staff perform general parks cleanup. That includes trash can changing, garbage pickup within the parks, and custodial duties within the restrooms themselves. It was one of those things to where normally we push the weekend duties further into the season, whereas this season we definitely should have moved it prior into the season, but then again, was just a staffing and scheduling thing. It absolutely would have been dealt with had seasonal staff been on duty. Other than that, that's all I got, unless you have any further questions.
No, thank you, Larry. Next item on the agenda, public comments, including emails. So, Eric, if you want to maybe continue on with your comment, if that, so when you said that people complained about Bartles Beach, what, that there was trash or the restrooms weren't open, or what was the...
The general comments were there was substantial amounts of usage at Bartles Beach, and there wasn't sufficient trash cans, and just the general upkeep of the park itself. Now, when I did look at it, I did come in on Sunday afternoon and take a look at some of the things and address some of them at that point. Park was very busy Sunday afternoon already. And like I said, generally it's a one-day service period for the parks. So every single day, Monday through Monday, the parks are cleaned up, service, custodial duties are done, and this just happened to be a weekend with high occupancy at the parks. And
So it wasn't a facilities issue, wasn't the playground equipment or the beach
Nope.
itself?
Just general high occupancy, and I will say we will have extra trash cans that are available. There is a dumpster across the street on the other side of Ferry Drive as well that is available for public to use, but just a unexpected high occupancy without having weekend custodial staff.
Thank you.
I do have one question. On the report, it mentions about the ad hoc committee on urban forestry being currently in the process of drafting the tree protection policy.
Mm-hmm.
So does that go directly when it's in draft format to the city council, or does it come to this body first, or how does it usually work?
So Parks Board is an advisory, so there is, I can actually reference a city council resolution for that. From my understanding, it will have to go to Parks Board as well.
Okay.
Parks Board recommendation or adoption, and then the city council at that point. By city code, there is actually the section that says Parks Board does have authority for trees within parks. Now, some of the duties, or the majority of the duties that this ad hoc committee does have, is regarding street tree construction. So if there's a protection policy that pertains to parks specifically, it would come in front of Parks Board. Now, if it's for general street tree management and policy updates, then it would just go from the ad hoc urban forestry committee to city council.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comments, including emails that people have received? Yes, Mike?
Two, I forwarded the one off of Facebook, and Eric has addressed that, I think, quite adequately about the usage of the park, and I can confirm, man, they were just jammed. That park was full. It was like summer. And then the second is that representative from the RLIA requested to be on the agenda to give a presentation to us about planning for the restaurant out at Sandy Beach and some features they're interested in seeing included. So I'm going to ask for that to be on the agenda for the next meeting. They've promised it'll be short.
My recommendation is, since the actual decision regarding moving forward on a design of the structure itself for the restaurant would be up to the city council's authority, they can absolutely present to Parks Board, but I would say the more adequate one to be, if they were to present to city council at this point, would be
I
my
think they're planning
recommendation.
both. I don't know that, but they were also, I was told they were going to hope that we would weigh in with the city council as a board regarding the issues, one of which is water, rain.
Stormwater management.
Stormwater management, how close the restaurant is to the water, et cetera.
Setback too, I think.
So yeah, they're aware that we have no formal power
But they would still
role
like to
in this.
perform a presentation.
Right.
Okay.
And just for a point of clarification, Mike, did I miss that request in this agenda item?
It came up late, and I think then I sent you an email, but I think it was too late to be included, because
Yeah.
I think if it's going to be on the agenda, we have to have a certain time period. do
Yep.
we not?
Yes.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
and I explained that to the petitioners, if you will.
Yeah. Because just a little bit, I thought that I didn't want them to think we were shutting them out or ignoring them, but just that we weren't able to add it to the agenda
Right.
given the time frame.
No.
They're certainly welcome if they'd like to present at the 19th. So thank you. Any other comments?
Well, I guess I would just like to ask, since I'm new on the Parks Board, and if anyone would like to email me now, my email address is linked to the city site, and I would like to hear from residents on various different issues that we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. I did have one public comment in that this person was very impressed by the city staff keeping up with the lawn mowing.
I'm glad to hear that, because we have been struggling. So
Well,
I'm glad to hear that.
I think they know how much they've been mowing their lawn,
Yeah.
even though it's no mow May. And they were quite impressed that both the commons and where they had walked, I guess, over by the cemetery, that like nonstop. So they
I will
were
say the
impressed.
cemetery is what seasonal staff I do have on duty currently. The priority's been athletic outfields and the cemetery. Cemetery is a substantial labor-intensive lawn mowing and weed whacking spot.
Yeah.
Now, our goal is to always have everything completed by Memorial Day, just because the procession or the actual parade comes up with the Legion members, and they do a ceremony up at the cemetery as
Yes.
well. So that's always our priority to have that done, but we've never seen this amount of growth at the cemetery. So whatever seasonal staff I've had available, they've been working very, very diligently up at the cemetery as much as possible.
Well, it was noticed, so.
Good.
You may want to subcontract to a farmer who needs hay. Get a baler out there.
Some of the areas we're almost at that point. They've been working 10, 12-hour days some days throughout this
Yeah.
week, but then we've been dodging a lot of weather as well. So we either have fantastic, very nice days or stormy, rainy days. There's not really a nice in-between the past couple weeks. But like I said, we will have weekend staff on, and if stuff is not finished by Friday afternoon, the understanding is that we'll all be on staff this weekend trying to get everything done for Memorial Day.
The other public comment that I had was regarding the mill pond and our recommendation, and they made me aware that the mill pond is considered a sensitive area, and they would be very surprised that the DNR would allow any dredging. And I said I'd bring that forward, and that will be discussed, and maybe Colton can speak to that. But I also talked to Eric a little bit about that comment as to, if I remember right, as part of our discussions over the years is that we need to make the recommendation before the DNR will make a decision.
We need to submit a formal,
At the permitting process.
Yes, so we'll go with our due diligence and our research and our presentations, and then let the DNR do their work, but that was a public comment. So, anything else? If not, let's move to number 9, new business. A is discussion recommendation for fulfilling the resolution. And there was a copy of the options in the link that says Strand 2024 OPCC. And so if you want to bring that up, I'm looking at mine now, and for whatever reason that did not print.
I could provide some updates as well regarding the previous OPCC and this.
And what is
this
the
document.
OPCC again?
That is opinion of probable construction cost. What we had done in the past is look at the available options that were presented within the Strand survey from 2018. At previous meetings, Parks Board talked about a couple of the options that they would like to pursue. One of which being the 50-foot channel within the mill pond, and then the mill pond itself, and then a potential expansion or renovation of Ferry Drive. So we did basically eliminate the other options since the channel was completed. Now, this was done from our contract engineer, Dwayne Vandermaus. He is a private contractor, basically our engineering liaison for the city. Strand is our contract engineer firm for the city who does the bulk of our engineering services. So what I did was take this very much approximated cost from the 2018 feasibility study and request Strand to provide more input, updated cost estimation to those available options. So what we're looking at here is basically the dredging of the entire mill pond. So in this attachment, that was the main motion made at previous Parks Board meetings, was the entirety of the mill pond being dredged.
Now, just for clarification, the open water of the
Open
mill.
water of the mill pond, yep.
That's one right.
So this is just that one option that was favored and requested. Yes, ma'am.
All mill pond at which depth? Because there are two depths.
824.03.
That's this
The
one.
deeper one.
that's
Yep.
the 4-foot.
Yep,
Not complete, just 4 foot.
4 foot.
That's
So
what I
4-foot depth,
thought that was.
like I said, that was requested from Parks Board, was the favorable or preferred option at that point was to dredge the entire surface water body to the depth of 824.03. That's what I requested of Strand to provide their opinion of projected construction cost. Now, they did make the comment as well that this is very much dependent on the approval of a DNR permit and waterways permits, et cetera. From actual engineering staff from Strand, they would be very surprised as well to see an approved permit at that depth for the entire surface water dredging. But at that point, I suppose it'll be discussed at a pre-application survey or pre-application submittal at the DNR level. Now, the two columns that I would like to talk about is the cost of project beneficial reuse and the cost of project landfill excavation. So the previous, yes,
May I
go
just
ahead.
pause? Just a little background as to the reason, and maybe Mary and Anita found this, the reason that we decided to recommend the 4 foot was, one, the dredging of the actual channel between the mill pond and the lake is at 4 feet. And the channel itself that goes from there to the landing at the fire station is 4 feet. Approximately. And we were concerned that if we did not go with the 4 feet to the sediment, that it would like fill in or go into those areas that were dredged. And if we went to 3 feet, it would just, we felt it would just impede any further option that we might have as far as if the city decided to make the downtown accessible, meaning that pontoon boats and bigger boats could get between the lake and Ferry Drive. The 4 foot depth seemed to be the most long-term.
Yeah, there's also kind of a component of like bang for the buck too,
Yes.
between the three different options. If we were to go to the draining or dredging all sediment, that's over double the cost of 4 feet.
I have a lot of questions, but Eric did a phenomenal job on bringing us up to speed on all of the conversation regarding all of the options. But I would like to, because thank you for clarifying the 4 foot. I have a question. Is this a good time to start asking the questions before we get into the dollars regarding
Yes.
where you landed with your decision?
It's your discussion to have.
So the 4 foot. So for one question, I have 2 questions. One is 4 foot versus 3 foot for almost double the cost, or over double the cost based on the chart that was shared on the 2 different options. When I think it depends on what goals, I guess, that we were looking to try to achieve. I live on a shoal that is 2.5 feet, and it used to be 4 feet. I learned back in the early 35, 40 years ago, and so we're getting a lot of sand erosion. And 2.5 feet is fine for my motors on the boat, motors, all kinds of boats. And so just curious if, just because the landing is 4 and the channel is 4, does that really, for the cost, require, depending again on the goals, whether we need to really go 4, especially for the cost? And I don't know if an additional foot of disruption is meaningful as far as the DNR perspective is concerned. And I don't know the answer, whether 3 feet or 4 feet, whether 1 foot deeper, because I was trying to understand what the word parent material, which I assume is deeper. We didn't look at parent material, which I think is probably the deepest part of that in 2019, that wasn't looked at. So I was trying to really understand that whole depth perspective.
Yeah, and Colton, might you be able to speak to parent material? Because my understanding is that's non-sediment. That's when you get down to like...
That's deeper than the 4th. I was trying to understand, like, is deeper, when you go deeper, do you have more, you obviously have more disruption in the surface or the base of the mill pond, and so would 3 feet be considered less disruptive? I mean, I think 3 feet will still be disruptive, but is it less disruptive? And then I was just trying to understand the goals around why that additional foot would be required. And I guess the second add-on question is, did you all discuss how to mitigate to the refilling of the sand? If you had to spend the money, would you go 3 feet and then mitigate the sand to try to minimize and hopefully remove the sand flow coming in, so that 3 feet is 3 feet, and it, generally speaking, stays at 3 feet over the course of history? And so you apply the money in a different way to mitigate it versus saying we're going to go to 4 because it's going to fill in. To me, it says we haven't fixed the problem, and that we're going to be talking about this in 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is again. And is that really? I don't know where the conversation was with regard to some of those questions I kind of, as I was looking at materials, were thinking about.
Yeah.
So we'll let McCray...
So that's a lot. I just threw at you.
McCray will
I'll
let
chime in first.
And then Colton can also answer some of these questions.
Yeah, so I guess I maybe was the first one to initially recommend the 4 foot depth. For me, is largely based on, as I mentioned before, bang for the buck, and 2, an extra foot of depth would provide, I guess we could calculate the amount of volume, but just additional time before we need to have this conversation again about dredging the mill pond. There's just, 1 foot times the area of the mill pond, more sediment available before, it's filling up again and we need to do this. As far as parent material, I guess I'll let you answer that question if you want to. Otherwise, I do have some cross sections here that can hopefully kind of explain that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm no soil specialist, but parent material is typically more of like kind of actual bottom of the lake, and you're kind of disturbing a lot of that. Whereas when you're dredging, you're typically just taking out a lot of that kind of sediment or muck that has built up over the year, and kind of made that kind of mucky layer that you kind of sink into until you get to what you consider more parent material. But I don't know if that kind of aligns with what you have as well. But
So would you hit parent? Would you hit parent at a 4 foot depth on the sure if you had,
Go ahead.
so that's what I was trying to understand, because that wasn't tested, and does it add a whole bunch of complexity?
You would probably likely, I would assume, hit parent material if you were, say, like right on the shore of the
Yeah.
pond and you went straight down 4 feet, you would be probably hitting parent material before 4 feet.
Okay.
Whereas when you're in kind of that like main channel of the mill pond, you're probably just hitting sediment and mud.
Still at 4 feet,
Yeah,
okay.
4 feet.
So it's just
So
the
this is
layer
a-
just below the sediment.
Yeah.
That's what the parent material is.
material.
Yeah,
This
I
is a
mean,
cross-section,
the
Yeah, I saw that
definition of it
exhibit.
is
so
general physical
Three feet.
chemical-
If I just pause, Colton, because let's listen to Colton's thing and then we'll.
Okay.
do
Yeah,
that.
and then
Just-
I don't, you want to do the microphone, because otherwise we won't.
Can you hear me?
No,
No.
not really.
Yeah, why don't we make sure that we get that onto the microphone?
Floor is yours.
I just want to have one conversation going.
I just pretty much Googled parent material, and it's pretty much just the composition of unconsolidated material, mineral, organic, in which soil forms. So yeah, it's kind of more of your outwashes, the stuff that came through with the glaciers and stuff.
the
So it's-
sands and gravels.
Yeah, so the
Okay.
sands and gravels outwashes, so it's more of your sand layer. So all that stuff above, like the sand in the mill pond, would be more considered like your sediment and muck and stuff.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's appropriate
So the
at this
base
time.
layer.
Geez, to-
Yeah.
So, Mary, Anita, questions?
Well, I just have one question. I was looking at the former city manager Steve Wilkie memo, and then Land and Water Patricia's comments, kind of redlined, I think, in that memo. And I saw that it said in 1992 that was thought to be the last dredging. But I think it said there was not a clarity of to what depth. Do we know to what depth it was? And was that the dredging, refresh me please, was that the whole thing, including the channel or just the mill pond? It's, what did that dredging in 1992 entail? Do we know? We don't know.
Did
I
Eric say
think-
that there was maybe not documentation of what was done?
Yes,
Okay.
so
That's what I recall.
We do not know.
we
Okay.
do not know, and we have not been able to find out definitively by
Okay.
city records as to cost and depth and specs.
Okay. So would that be something, would that be information DNR, well, DNR probably doesn't have the records because it's so old.
And it may also not have been approved.
Oh, all
There's a
right.
possibility of that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Eric, is that, I don't want to, recall that conversation. There was talks of dredging in the 90s, and there was little documentation of that.
From my record, I don't have any submitted applications for dredging from the city, with the exception of, in the late 90s, the channel was dredged, and it's specifically from the channel that's recently been dredged, from the Rock Lake to the mill pond. In regards to the mill pond itself, I don't have any record of any submitted applications from the DNR.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted, because I thought that would be good to know when we're talking about depth, like, how was that done before?
And those are documented. When you submit an application, it'll at least be on record, whether it's approved or denied, and we don't have any record of any
Okay.
submitted
All right,
applications.
thank you.
Tim, could I mean, that's one of the basic questions is how fast will it fill in, obviously. And we've kicked that around for a while. You'll speak to the sand part, but I also did some offline investigation with the guy who's a hydrologist in the mountains, actually. And it's really unknowable because things can change, current, temperature, how much stuff is coming in from other parts of the lake. Eric will speak to the sand, so we really don't know.
I would say the largest thing would be to differentiate native vegetation decaying, building up the sediment versus man-made applied sand within the beach that's washing
That we
in the
can
channel.
address.
There are mitigation methods that are being researched with the actual building of a new Bartles Beach seawall. Now, the effectiveness of some of those, I'm not quite sure. I don't know what the effectiveness of those will be. We have done some mitigation methods to limit the amount of sand, change the coarseness of the sand to eliminate as much as possible the erosion of that sand. It was previously replenished. I can look back in previous records. The amount of tonnage that was applied per year has drastically been reduced in recent years. but mitigation methods for stopping that sand washing along the Bartles Beach wall into the mill pond is at least being researched and being
Yeah, good.
considered within the
Okay.
Bartles Beach seawall reconstruction. Now, one of the aerials that I did show you was that 2023 aerial. Without a doubt, you can see the differentiation between sand material and silt. It's very prominent within those aerial photos. You can see the sand coming through the channel. The channel's very lightly colored. You can see that silt, or not the silt, but the sand going into the mill pond. I certainly hope that reconstruction of that Bartles Beach seawall will at least help mitigate that. But I have seen, at least within the last 3 years of my records, substantially less erosion at all beaches that the city owns since changing the frequency of sand and changing the coarseness of the sand.
Yeah, the sand is heavier now.
It's heavier, but then again, we do have 3 records of lower rainfall. One of the biggest things that we do have as far as sand being pulled away from the beach is the frequency of ice shoves. That's probably one of the biggest erosion methods within the beaches. So when the ice is shoved on the beach and then melts and recedes, that's one of the biggest things that pulls sand away from the beaches. We saw that pretty prominently in 2022. We had a lot of ice shoves, so it was heavy winds during the breakup period, pushed ice shoves or ice barges up onto the beaches. When they melted, they receded. But then again, we've seen substantially less erosion in the past 3 years. Now, I don't have a big pool of years of data to pull from that, so we're just going off of 3 years worth of data, or worth of observations for the most part. But the other thing is the maintenance frequency of the mill pond dredging itself to stop the sand from washing into the mill pond body rather than the channel. The last time that channel was dredged was the late 90s. So we're talking over a 25-year period of time. If that is dredged more frequently with less material being removed, perhaps we are just removing that sediment from the channel itself before it gets to the actual mill pond. And that has just never been done in the past. So I think one of the biggest things would just be more frequent maintenance of the operations of dredging within the channel before we have that man-made sediment or man-made sand or placed sand going into the mill pond.
Do we know, McCrae or others that have been part of this, what was the depth of the dredging that happened back in the late 90s?
4 foot.
4 foot. And to my knowledge, right now, in
That's
the
the
mill
channel.
pond.
That's the channel.
the
Channel.
That's
Yeah.
the channel.
Just the channel.
The channel. But in the boat launch to the channel, there are parts of that are no longer even 2 feet deep. Is that correct? If I'm looking at the topo of the base, Colton, do you have that record?
Yeah, I got difference in depth. Yeah, it's the kind of that channel going between the channel and the boat launch you're talking.
Yes.
Kind of near the boat launch, it's around 4 feet, but then as you're getting closer to the channel, it goes more up to 2 feet in depth, and that's based off of the last point intercept survey that the county did back in 2022. So that's the most recent data we have of those depths.
Mike?
And not to get lost in a rabbit hole, but wasn't the dredging in the 90s of the actual mill pond, wasn't that so they could put that intake pipe for the fish hatchery, or am I off by?
The specific one that I was referencing would be the actual channel itself. So that navigable channel from Rock Lake to the mill pond itself. Now the dredging for the installation of that intake pipe, I'm not quite sure. That would be the more installation of infrastructure, so actually being that intake pipe rather than dredging for increased navigability.
Right.
So they're installing something in the mill pond, so infrastructure being that intake pipe, rather than
Right.
focusing on dredging for the sake of navigability.
And
It
that-
was a different motive.
Right, and the intake pipe is over more by the actual Bartles Beach. Is that
But it
correct?
extends out. a
Right.
ways.
I'd have to look back at
Yeah,
it.
but
Yeah.
I believe it's more to the north and
Yeah, it goes out.
From the channel, from the bridge channel.
Yeah.
So just be aware that with that, also, we've had landowner comments about accessibility and such on, from their property to the channel itself. And right now, some are saying they can't get their boats even to the channel because it's so shallow. So to your point about it, our understanding is that to be navigable for most motors, it has to be 2.5 feet deep. Otherwise, you start messing up sediment and chopping up aquatic plants. So that's the other thing. The landowners, how many do we have on the property? Irene, 11 are there?
I believe 12.
12.
12 parcels. I think there are 11 property owners.
And I would say at least half of them have presented that they would like it deeper so they have more access to the water for their boats and for their such.
So then based on the memo, or the information regarding the bridge, South Ferry Bridge, I'm trying to understand what an 8-foot increase in the bridge height, how that would be, because I live on South Ferry, so every day I walk over and drive over now that I'm learning and thinking about this committee and this big challenge. Like, what is an 8-foot increase? I'm trying to picture how that, because I'm hearing if it's 4 feet, if they want more depth, it means larger motors or a motor. And right now, small fishing boats and boats can get through there. And I read that there are a lot more currently even using, Erica, you had shared more using the launch.
Yep.
With the current dredging of just the channel. But the ability to get something other than a smaller sized motorcraft or all non-motorcraft, like getting something through the South Ferry, either South Ferry is kind of a part of the solution or the goals are different. The goals are small motorcraft and non-motorcraft for riparian owners and for the public. So I don't know, did you talk about like the goals?
Yes.
Because when you say navigable, that really means a lot to a lot of different things to a lot of people. So what?
Yes.
Because I didn't read that anywhere. That's what I'd
Well,
like to learn more about too.
it's what we have discussed is a number of things. If we go with some people's wishes and the proposal in Strand is that if they change the height of the bridges on the channel, on ferry, it would allow more people to access the downtown businesses. Because they could bring in and I might be paraphrasing, but they can bring in their pontoons and their more capacity boats to the downtown without restrictions of the depth of the channel or the depth of the mill pond itself. So there were some people that would like that ability to have more commerce coming directly to the mill pond. The other part of it is the response time for the fire boat would be almost more than doubled or half, whatever the proper word would be. Response,
Substantially less.
right? They could go directly from the firehouse to the lake without having to go down to. Right now, they're going down to Sandy Beach to launch, so that would markedly increase their response. Reduce their response time. So those were some options as to the raising of the ferry bridges.
Some of the,
Thanks.
if I may, Tim.
Yes.
Some of the comments that I've made in past meetings was differentiating between what is our current issue versus future development or future projects of the mill pond.
Right.
Yeah.
I do firmly believe that if the mill pond were to be accessed by larger watercraft, dredging would be a prerequisite of raising that bridge itself. So which step comes first for future development? Either way, I think by default it comes down to dredging being a prerequisite of that. So what is our current issue at hand? The issue that's been brought up is navigability of the mill pond for motorboats, mostly by the public, and what needs to be done to address that, and that would be dredging. Now, as far as increasing access to the mill pond, that would be raising the actual Ferry Street bridges themselves.
Yeah. So the resolution from City Council included, or they requested both short-term and long-term goals for the mill pond. And some of the things we discussed at the last meeting was like the dredging of the mill pond was in the short-term category, but how we handle the bridge, that's kind of a longer-term goal, because the dredging's a prerequisite, like you said.
Or installing, like, if there were to be, currently I know Mary, Anita and I discussed at the mill pond boat launch itself, you cannot moor there. Mooring is storing your watercraft on the pier. Currently that's for launching and retrieving of your watercraft only. If there are going to be structures that are installed that allow mooring, which would be pedestrian access off of your boat to downtown businesses, that would be a future development. That would theoretically increase commerce, etc., but that would definitely be the long-term potential goal or outline of the mill pond. The goal is really determined by you as a board or as a committee. What is the long-term goal of the mill pond? But separating the dredging itself would be, like McCray said, a short-term option.
So if there was a goal that a mill pond, and I'm just making this up. I'm just making this up as an example, or as a not sure exactly where all of the goal setting starts and finishes and where we've all discussed. But if the mill pond was a special non-motorized, I don't know how many acres is it? 6 acres? 4 acres? 6? How many acres is the mill pond?
I'd have to go back
4
in the
acres?
aerial again.
But it's a kayak center. Kayak, paddleboard, no or low motor allowed. I know that the launch and this fireboat response is an interesting new need that I hadn't thought about or read about. But that would be a different set of objectives for the mill pond than if the goal was to eventually open it up and make it a full-blown access point. And then we're going to have 2 restaurant accesses, if you will. We'll have Sandy Beach, and then you'll have the ability to pull up there and get all of the downtown stuff for a small number of boats. And so I think that's where the goals, it makes a difference on what you would, I would think what you want to do with the mill pond, depending on what kind of traffic or utilization the city and citizens desire, and how to pay for it.
Those are very large
How to pay
questions.
for it,
Yeah.
because you have the 12 property owners have a very big vested interest in their property values, but they have a super vested interest, and so and then the city, the riparian owners or non-riparian owners, citizens and visitors and whatnot who may want to come and utilize it as another thing. But I'm just trying to think about I would do something different depending on what we all wanted it to be, or what the city wanted it to be.
If I may say, I think that's why initially that 50-foot wide channel option was proposed, because what that does is allow people to launch their watercraft at Veterans Lane at the boat launch itself and access Rock Lake via motorized watercraft. So you can launch your boat, access Rock Lake, and that would be just from that 50-foot wide channel.
Yeah.
So that's not the entire surface area of the mill pond itself. So it leaves the rest of the mill pond alone for potentially non-motorized watercraft, but it also still addresses the navigability issue from the boat launch itself to Rock Lake. And I think that's why the intent of a 50-foot wide channel was initially proposed. So you're kind of saying, or delineating the 2 potential goals. One is increased navigability to Rock Lake, still providing motorboat access to Rock Lake, but leaving the rest of the mill pond alone. Is that correct?
Well, I'm brand new to this subject, so my mind has been thinking all over the board. That I would have you ever thought about shutting down? I don't know what kind of revenue we bring in on that particular launch. We built a double launch on the south side. The city has a beautiful double launch over there. Have you ever thought, shut the launch, make it a non-motorized place to go. The lake with the turmoil of boats on the weekends is crazy, and kayakers and paddleboarders, unless you get out in the morning or you're there late at night, and unfortunately they're out a lot late at night after dusk, and it makes me very nervous. We saved a woman last year in the dark who had tipped out of her kayak without her thing on, and so that's just something that I observed. So if you wanted to make a quiet, non-motorized place, that would be a beautiful, super cool, non-motorized, but that is a whole different vision, and it means a whole different set of ideas and thoughts on how to utilize the space versus just saying, we've got the launch, let's keep using it. I don't know how many boats use it. I'm not informed, I'm not educated on its purpose. I didn't think about the fireboat. That's really interesting. So I don't know. I'm just still trying to catch up a little bit, but my whole brain is all over thinking about cool stuff.
A number of things that you bring up are extremely valid. What we are trying to do is, again, going back to our discussion and recommendations, we want the mill pond to be accessible to both kayakers, canoeists, stand-up paddleboarders, and the people that go there to fish. And both to use the mill pond for fishing, which some do, and also get their fishing boats out to the main Rock Lake. So that's another reason we want it to be accessible to the citizens or visitors to Lake Mills. The other issue that we have found, and Colton, maybe you can speak to this, it is our understanding that a lake owner has the right to build their pier all the way out where they can have access to the water. So
that's correct, and that would be under DNR guidelines, their waterways.
right.
So
So
they would have to follow some exemptions. There's like a whole exemption checklist that they have to follow to do
Right.
that. But it's typically you can extend your pier out, I think, to 3 feet or sufficient to be able to dock your boat and be able to drive it in and out by that.
right.
the end
So
of the pier.
our discussion, this I think goes back to one of the reasons we went to the 4 feet depth versus the
3 feet.
3 feet,
What's that?
is because we envisioned that some of these landowners said, all right, you got this nice channel out there, I'm going to build my 60-foot or 160-foot pier out to that channel. So what happens to the kayakers and the stand-up paddleboarders and the people that are fishing on the corner when they've got all these piers going out to the channel? I'd rather have a 15-foot pier than to have a 150-foot pier. So that's another reason why we thought that if we can make it accessible so people can use the entire surface area, that was one of the reasons that we went for the more of the recommendation of the depth. And our first recommendation was not going to be anything to do with raising the bridge because of the cost. And again, as McCray said, that's long-term. Short-term, though, right now our recommendation is we want to make the mill pond usable to both the landowners, fisher people, and anybody that's wants to get in there.
Yeah, I'll add on to that if I
Small
can.
craft.
Oh, sorry, Mike, you had
No,
your,
you-
okay. With the dredging the whole mill pond to the 4 foot depth versus just a channel, that kind of opens, I guess I'd be more of an advocate for opening the mill pond to all users. You're concerned about boats out in the lake, that's out in the center of the lake, that's not a no wake zone, and I guess I anticipate that if the mill pond is dredged and larger
It
boats
would be
can come.
required to be no
It'd be no wake,
Yeah,
yeah.
it would be
It'd have
required
to
to
be,
be.
right? Yeah.
So I
Correct.
think,
That'd be
with
quite
larger
nice
boats
anyway.
going slower speeds, I don't think, and obviously we won't know, but I don't think there will be the same conflicts with kayakers and paddleboarders that on the mill pond that happen out in the lake. And then with the 4 foot depth, as you mentioned, it'd be good for shore fishermen, continuing to utilize the current boat launch. I think it's good to utilize the resources that we already have, provide more access to the lake. If we shut that down, there'd be 2 boat launches on the lake instead of 3?
3?
No,
There's
there's
4.
several. So there's
Well, there's
actually the
one
north end,
There's on
North End
townships
County
and-
launch. There's one off Shorewood Hills.
Yeah.
There's Elm Point and Sandy Beach.
But those are only two city ones.
Correct. Right now, there are only 2 city boat launches.
And a couple of those are just gravel. The ones on the
Elm Point and the
township
one on
side.
Shorewood are township, and those are gravel. The one on the north end, so I would say developed boat launches would be the North End County launch and Sandy Beach.
Well, I think what create there's that gravel one that's end up what Lake Street or that you can put your kayaks in,
There's.
right?
Oh, I'm not counting those.
Yeah.
You're not counting them,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
There's a difference between, there's carry and access sites, and this is actually a state delineation. There's carry and access sites, and then there's actual boat launches.
Yeah.
Boat launch is determined if you can launch an actual motorized watercraft.
Yeah. So I think there's three developed boat launches, correct? And then
Counting
we'd
the
be,
fire department.
what was that?
Counting the fire department, right?
Counting the one right by the fire department. So if
So it
we
would be
decided
4.
to,
4.
Yeah, there would be 4.
You have the,
4
There's
developed
actually
boat
five,
launches.
yeah, there's
you
5.
have the one on the
total,
north
4.
end, you have Sandy Beach, you have the one on the west side, which is, yeah.
okay.
It's gravel, but it's got a concrete pad.
Yeah.
And
Oh, it
there's
does,
also-
okay.
Actual, yeah, it's an
then-
actual
and
motorboat
then
access
the
site.
one by the fire.
Okay.
Yep.
But yes, I guess my point is I would advocate against removing the resources we already have as far as boat launches from operation, because it would just put more stress on the other boat launches out there.
The other thing that comes up, and again, wouldn't be part of our recommendation at this point, but it is part of our discussion, is in our discussions, there used to be a boat houses, or condominiums, for lack of a better term, along where the fire department is. So what we are thinking about, either kayakers or canoeists or boatists, they need a place to pull in and like walk downtown.
More.
What's that?
More.
More,
Yeah.
which is not there. So that's the other thing we want. If we were to make it deeper, they would be able to moor there. And again, for future, if bigger boats are allowed to come in, then they could also moor there. But right now, I think the depth right along where the kids fish between the VFW, the Legion, and the launch, that's some of it's only like a foot deep.
And
so
then again, I will say there is no public mooring opportunities available on Mill Pond currently.
right.
So that is, I had it jotted down in short-term goals. It could fall into either, but to access the downtown economical benefits that were highlighted in the Strand report, those are pretty, I guess they are critical to access the funds. So I think that the mooring opportunity could either be a short-term or a long-term goal, depending how we look at it.
Yes.
There are definitely different tiers of involvement. There could be one thing that's proposed within Strand is to have, similar to Sandy Beach, long-term leasable storage options or boat lists within there. Or there could be fairly low cost. When I say fairly low cost, we're saying less than $100,000, like rentable spots for kayaks to go, or a kayak access point, or potentially a mooring dock that has limited access points, etc. So there are definitely multi-tiered stages that you could do.
And we talked, sorry, Mike.
Just to get back to the usage, the RLIA a couple of years ago did a survey on usage of the lake and parking, and we got volunteers and we tabulated, and I think it was 4th of July or something, we went to all the parking lots, and the number of, now whether it was because they couldn't get in the water so shallow, but there were minimal number of cars parked down by the fire station there using that boat launch. It was very, very underused. Now, again, that may be because they couldn't get in or because they came from the other way. The other thing I was going to say, but it slipped my mind, so we'll see if it comes back.
Well, I'm just talking about my personal experience. I have not anymore, but had a 16-foot, 40 horsepower, and it got to the point where I wouldn't use that launch because once towards the end of the year when the sand would get there, you couldn't get through there. So unless you're going with a real small boat or a canoe, that's one of the reasons people aren't parking
Well,
there.
they were fishing in there. There were boats, but they were coming under the under the bridge. They were
Right.
not using that launch.
I
I'm
will
not saying they
say-
can't, but
Yeah, I will say one of the biggest problems would be the channel itself. I mean,
Yep.
that was non-navigable. It was non-accessible by even non-motorized water.
but no, I'm talking about at that time we
Prior.
did that survey. There were boats that went under that bridge and they
Right,
were using.
right.
The other thing to bring up on that, if you're going to increase it, and I think Tim brought that up, parking. If you want to increase the number of kayakers or boaters, then you have to start talking about where you're going to park. What is that going to do with the fire department access? Da 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 da. Because they got to get out. So where you're going to have those additional cars if we increase the launch facilities there, parked somewhere where they're safely out of the way of the fire trucks and emergency vehicles.
And right now, and this goes back to my prior experience with the DNR too, the public parking at Veterans Lane is a gravel drive.
Yep.
It is a gravel drive on the west end of Veterans Lane, on the west end of basically the apparatus bay doors of the fire department. It is non-delineated parking. And what I mean by that is it is a gravel drive. It is not a lined, striped, numbered parking lot. When parking is full, when stalls are delineated, parking is full. When it is a gravel drive, what is constituted as full? It depends on how people park. So I think that's one of the issues that I suppose we really haven't discussed too much, but perhaps that would be a long-term goal, or maybe an option within short-term is having a paved parking area where the gravel drive is there and maybe delineating parking stalls. Now I will say the amount of delineated parking stalls on a water body is determined by DNR regulations.
Well, that's why we only have a smaller amount on the
You're
south
correct.
end, which
Yeah.
causes a lot of
Grief.
I think safety challenges with everyone parking on the side of the road makes it one lane essentially,
Yeah.
kind of coming in. It's really,
But then again,
that's a different subject
yeah,
for the day.
totally
right?
different subject as well. But the whole reason why the Sandy Beach parking lot is the size it is and how many parking stalls are there is because of DNR regulations. How many parking stalls are available for boaters to access this body of water? But then again, we've never delineated parking stalls for the mill pond, so it's a new topic.
Well, I was just because I actually think something needs to be done here. I'm just trying to learn about
Yeah.
what you all have thought about and what options, because I've been around enough to kind of see that it doesn't get used as extensively, this launch, for a lot of reasons. One, you couldn't get through. Smaller boats can only get under the bridge. So just if we were envisioning, how could the mill pond be a really cool, accessible spot for the amount of money that we're going to put into it? I know we're talking about raising the bridge later, but boy, it'd be nice to have a vision, and if it means taking out the launch and not putting any, I don't know, kayaks ideas are one thing, parking is an issue, but I mean, just at least making sure we've got that really thought out pretty darn well.
Well, the plan
Before we
was-
get too far on dredging, and then we're trying to go back for a lot more money to do a lot more stuff, because then we think of the ideas.
You're talking about, remember we talked about putting like a walkway where there used to be those boathouses here on the south side. Here's the fire station along here, and then having that be the
Like the mooring
non-motorized,
over here.
right? The non-motorized vessel launch, and that's where you brought up that one that's in Lions Park
Yep,
somewhere.
Lions Park in Marshall. Like I said, I was somewhat involved
That's nice.
in that, and I would say that's in retrospect, low-cost option. Now, like I said, low cost is fairly subjective,
Yes.
but when you're talking about public fishing pier or mooring opportunity or kayak launch, the $40-some thousand installation cost is fairly low. That's fairly reasonable when you look at long-term installations and low impact. And that one I feel like is easily accessible by both ADA fishermen who would like to access it via shoreline fishing, or you can't really access via shore, so it's more of a fishing pier, but then it's also multi-use. You can launch non-motorized watercraft from it too. And I would say that's a less intrusive and lesser cost option to provide that access point.
And just a couple things with that is for if you've had an opportunity, if you go down to Sand Hill, and that their boardwalk that goes out into the lake, which was added probably, I don't know, I'm gonna say 10, it was probably 20 years ago. But again, it's same helped with the access, but that's all no motor, no anything down there too, but you can launch. The mental model I also have, as far as function, not so much of look, is, have any of you been down to the Rock Lake and launch area in Jefferson?
Rock
Yeah.
River.
The
That's a
Rock
nice-
River, I'm sorry.
That's a nice one.
Yeah, and they've got by their like public space, they have the where you can pull up, you can moor a boat and go up to the restaurants or you can kayaks, but there's a number of, and it get used quite a bit. So I think that's another thing that we're looking at as far as vision for use and, maintenance preservation. That would be something like that where they could have, as Eric is saying, access like they have in Marshall, but also access like they have in Jefferson for the mill pond.
Tim, that isn't the one, Jefferson isn't the one that's behind the high school there.
It's across from Heron's Landing, the restaurant, and it's right by, I don't know, the old the old railroad station. It's right there, and there's a bandbox or bandstand.
Something else. Okay, thank you.
But anyway, it gets used a lot. So again, those are the kind of things that give us, if we make the mill pond deep enough so we can moor, we can access, we can fish, we can keep the piers short. These are things that we've kind of discussed and have envisioned.
I'm sorry, somebody else have something? I just wanted to ask one question. One business owner was mentioned as expressing desire. Were there other business owners that expressed desire for having people be able to get their boats in there, from the lake and then come in and do shopping or eating at the restaurants? Was it just one business owner?
I do not believe we got any other comments.
Public comments was just one business
Okay,
owner.
thank you.
I have had other,
It's
no, I have had other people say, they said, oh, that'd be a good idea.
Well,
But
But
business owners
that was only one business owner, but there's other people that said, oh, that, when you had these conversations, oh, that would be nice to be able to get to the moor there and to be able to walk and get a, bite to eat at the
okay, thank you.
Timber Creek or whatever.
I don't want to play devil's advocate, but I will say one of the issues that I had by allowing mooring in previous careers was when you designate mooring locations, where does the enforcement come? Because normally mooring is for short-term mooring rather than beyond 24-hour mooring. If you have 4 mooring spots for 4 watercraft, well, one person could moor their watercraft there and use it for extended periods of time, thus limiting the amount of usage to other watercraft and public access. And I know that was one of the slippery slopes that we kind of went down, is once you designate an area for mooring, how much time is too much? So it comes down to an enforcement issue. And like I said, I don't want to add another layer of difficulty to this or complexity to this, but it is an issue that I've noticed in the past as well.
Is that something that we, one of us or myself, could call with Marshall? Know what do they do for enforcement? What does Jefferson do for
That one's
enforcement?
not mooring. So mooring is not allowed at Marshall. That's just a launching
Okay.
point. But sure, yeah, absolutely. If there's other municipalities or other areas that do encourage mooring for downtown businesses, maybe we can get an opinion, because I just know it was an issue. And I didn't do local enforcement for those regulations. It was the local municipalities that actually did the enforcement for it. But it was frequently brought up that it was an issue.
Yeah, when I get down there, I'll look at signage that they have there and see if that has whatever it says.
Yeah, 'cause then you run
I hate
into
to bring that up,
well, you run
but-
into somebody who's coming to visit a friend for the weekend and they have a boat. And what's going to happen is they park their boat there overnight.
They
And
could.
that's very, very common in mooring situations.
And if you
Especially for
encourage and
motorcraft.
sign- yeah, if you
it's
encourage
very,
mooring.
yeah.
So like I said, it's
Not a fan of
if we do
mooring. I can
consider
tell you
mooring,
say where
it's
I'm
just
going. I want this to-
a positive and a negative thing to think about if we do encourage mooring.
Let them have boats.
What I'd like to do, if
I'd shut this down.
people
I'd
agree,
shut this down.
I want to go back to our A
Shut this down.
and
Motors.
recommendations in that, remember, and McCrae's
Shut this
done a
down.
nice job of going back to this. citizen and city goals for the uses. I think there's supposed to be a comma there, but uses, maintenance, and preservation of the mill pond. So we've been talking a lot about the uses. We've been talking about the maintenance, which is, I think, if I understand, if it's a universal depth, it's going to be less maintenance because it's all one thing. And also as far as preservation, my understanding, and Colton can speak to this as an expert, or maybe McCray, if you have the water at 4 feet, there's an issue of like water clarity and then the weeds, the better weeds can get down to that 4 feet, and it's a good place for the bass and the bluegills and all that sort of thing, versus if it's shallower than that, it heats up and you get more like surface growth, or is all that not true?
Defer that to you.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, if you have it all 4 feet, you're going to have a lot more just kind of the same types of plants. You're not going to likely have as much diversity of plant species, which you do have a good diversity right now. There's like 23 different types of plants. But if you take it down to that 4 feet across the whole thing, you're pretty much wiping the slate clean if you're dredging the whole thing. And you're most likely to have invasive species, which is already somewhat present in the mill pond in the form of like Eurasian water milfoil for the most part. And if you dredge all the way down to that, the likely case, and I can't predict the future, but you would most likely have a lot more Eurasian water milfoil coming in and taking over a lot of the area, and eventually it completely surface mats. So then you would have to be looking at some way of like controlling it that way. There is also the other possibility, there might be some native plants that come up. It's really time would tell what happens. And if you are taking all the way down to 4 feet, you're taking a lot of those kind of shoreland plants away that do help with a lot of like erosion from you're having your surface runoff and stuff. Those help to obtain a lot of those nutrients and stuff before it gets to the mill pond, creating algae blooms. So if you have it down to 4 feet, you likely could have more algae blooms at least the first few years before the plant species become established. So you could have a lot more just green slime growing around, and yeah, you would likely probably have less of like the whitewater lilies coming up and stuff, which is good habitat for a lot of the fish species and stuff to get cover, not just cover from structure in it, but also cover shade structure so they can get to those kind of shaded off areas where it might be a little bit cooler water.
So you're saying that 4 feet would actually be deleterious?
What's that?
4 feet might be deleterious compared to 3 feet.
That'd be bad.
Yeah.
Worse. Sorry.
Yeah, possible.
Yes.
And I mean, you'd like to see kind of more of kind of a
Gradation.
slow slope. You wouldn't want it. You
Well, I
wouldn't
don't think
go
we're
right from
talking
the
about
shore.
going right to the bank,
Yeah.
though.
Okay.
But no, that's important to know. I
Yeah.
thought 4 feet was better in general for the health of the mill pond than 3, but not necessarily so.
It's not necessary.
One of the,
you have to wait for
you
some
could
time.
think a little bit more critically
Yeah.
of some of the
You can toss
options that were listed from Strand, just because those are the options that Strand presented, does not by default mean those are the options that we have to go with. So for instance, you could take a combination of the entire surface body with a 4 foot, 50 foot, or 50 foot wide channel from the actual boat launch to the lake itself, and then you could deviate that depth for the rest of the surface water itself. So just because these are the strict options that they proposed does not mean that that is what has to be recommended.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this as far as having somebody like Colton and some other that's more of a hydrologist and knowledgeable about the flora and fauna of this, is that you could potentially have the channel, and then for the piers and the shore people, you could also have like a loop channel go there, and then in the middle could be more like of a shallow island, which could be delineated either by a buoy or just once you hit it once, you wouldn't do it again. But that would be where the lily pads could be. So you'd have sort of that diversity of both, because the biggest thing is people want to be able, one, they want to get back and forth from the launch to the lake, and the people on the lake, they want to be able to get their boats into the lake without having to have, a huge pier.
So my recommendation would be then is you have your by default 4-foot depth. You have your 50-foot channel wide going from the boat launch to the channel itself. Maybe one of the things that you could pursue as a board is what is a potential third option? What is an in-between between those two? That hasn't been drafted. It hasn't been proposed by Strand. I know they had one of the options being fingers coming out from each private pier, when that's only sustaining just those private pier owners themselves. Maybe there's something in between that could kind of satisfy multiple different user groups, but that option hasn't been pursued or hasn't been drawn up. We don't have a drafted diagram of that. But like I said, maybe it's something you as a board could discuss. What is a potential medium between some of the options that have been proposed?
Yeah, Tim, your idea of doing like the 50-foot channel, but then doing just a loop off of the pier. We'll just say, let's pretend all their piers are about the same length. Doing a pier route, so they back their boat out and then they circle out as the dredge part, and leaving some some of it possibly natural, that you don't dredge at all in a section, or maybe the part closest to the, I don't know, pros and cons. We'd have to get insight on where it might be best for them. Is actually a balance between not dredging the whole thing and upsetting some of the surface.
Yes,
and that's an interesting concept.
Well,
It's more complicated.
Well,
It is. It's complicated for dredging.
Right,
but
you bring in complication,
interesting.
but going to Colton's expertise and others,
Balance.
is that would give you that much more fishing opportunity, because you'd have, if you had that like a U instead of a V or a bowl, if you would have that gradation where
Interesting.
different things would grow on those channels, and you'd have access. And again, I'm not on on a lake all the time, but I'm gonna guess it isn't like being a racetrack. It's like they get in, they go, but I don't want to limit people's ability to use their kayaks and learn to stand up paddle. That'd be a really good place for them to do that. But they don't have any draft. I mean, what are the stand up paddle? 6 inches maybe? It's not much.
Oh, you need a little bit more because you have a fin.
Okay, that's right.
So let's
Thank
say
you.
a foot.
That's right.
Yeah,
right.
you need
There
a
you
little
go.
more
A
'cause you
foot.
have a
So
fin,
we're at a
otherwise
foot.
you're scraping the
But
bottom
we're
of your
saying
fin.
we want to make sure that we're considering all the options, but we don't want to make it. And thank you, Colton, for that. If we don't want to make it something that's going to have this huge bloom and people say, "What did you do?" And
Make it worse.
yeah, Colton. I mean, McCray.
The proposed option or discussed option of draining the 50-foot channel and then a loop, I guess my concern with that is that would provide no additional shore fishing opportunity, or very limited, basically be at the launch and then the private dock owners, I guess. And
So
as
you're
far
eliminating one of those uses,
Yes.
potential uses.
yeah, I guess the option, I can't remember who brought it up, but the blend of, I think it'd be important to match the 4 feet through the to the channel, to the 50-foot channel to the boat launch. I think that'd make a lot of sense to just have a continuous depth. I could support a lesser depth to the rest of the mill pond, whether that's 3 feet, or I guess that was the other option given as a cost-saving measures.
With Colton's comment, I'm thinking if we can preserve certain parts where we're not disturbing that, but then giving access to the, as McCray says, from the launch to the channel of the lake, and then access to the people that are on the lake itself. And then if we had like that, some sort of platform on the south side of that could get at the people for fishing opportunity.
I suppose this is kind of where I envision hopefully reaching all the user groups as well. there's a very finite or small amount of public property that you could access from shore to the mill pond. I mean, the entire north side of the mill pond is privately owned. It cannot be accessed from the general public for shoreline fishing. So perhaps maybe along city-owned properties, that 4-foot depth or maybe a certain width is proposed for dredging just along the public access points along the shoreline. And that would be along Bartles Beach owned property and then along Veterans Lane to the back of the Legion Hall. Those are the two larger parcels of city-owned property. So
Could you
maybe,
repeat that, maybe?
so along Veterans Lane to the Legion Hall is city-owned property. And then the property along the east side of Bartles Beach, on the east side of Ferry Drive, is public property as well. So perhaps there could be additional dredging along those public shorelines to increase the amount of shoreline fishing opportunities at those public points. You know, like I said, instead of having a flat rate dredging, you could kind of picture like a topography of various depths at different points in the mill pond. You could delineate the private access groups along the north side for their boat access, the motorboat access from the actual boat launch itself to the channel, and then the last user group, actually I should say one of the last, would be increased shoreline, public shoreline fishing and recreation opportunities, but then also preserving some natural elements of the mill pond itself. So you could say there's 4 different user groups within that. And it would just be, I suppose, proposing various depths and areas of dredging.
I guess it's a technical question. I'm ignorant on this. So might it be analogous to when you dig in sand, a trench, and you go deeper here, the stuff up here slides into it? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean,
and we have seen that already in the channel itself. So within the channel, a lot of that material slides into the deepest portion. You have moving water that's disrupting sediments. You have motor boats going through a channel that is disrupting sediments, and that sediments do settle. So areas will fill in with sediment. They will. They're going to move from the higher areas to the lower areas just by moving water, etc. But this hasn't been pursued before. So
yeah, I mean, I asked. Honestly, I don't know if that buggers up our plan or not.
Well, I'll go back to Colton's comment. If we can keep what's there,
Right.
the lilies and the such, that will hopefully hold some of that sediment.
Yeah, maybe.
And then other desirable plants will also go down that kind of gentle slope. Because we don't want to make it a swimming pool, you know, with hard edges and things like that. I think you want to make it like a U, but still keep water flow and keep depth.
I would expect that even when you do dredge it down to 4 feet, you're gonna still have aquatic plants grow in those 4-foot depth areas. Because I mean, out on Rock Lake, I mean, the littoral zone goes down to I think 10 or 12 plus feet for some plants and stuff. You're gonna surely have plants growing. They're just gonna likely not come up to the surface if there's continued use of birds and stuff, keeping them cropped down. Otherwise, I mean, a lot of lakes do aquatic plant management, and they use like aquatic harvesters to keep those areas open of plants, and they have to do that every week or every 2 weeks.
Lower Spring Lake in Elmira or Isabel Demia, they do substantial amounts of weed harvesting within that lake.
Yeah.
But I suppose what I would like to see, at least from my perspective, some people are visual learners, being able to understand what it is that we're talking about, where city property is, where city property is not. You know, talking about different shapes of dredging at different depths. I would kind of like to see at least some kind of rough drawing of what that would look like, kind of what you as a board would like to see for that. And maybe at least I can do is put together a rough, I'm no artist, but maybe I can put together a rough drawing of, I think, kind of what it is that we're discussing at this point and provide it to some of you, and maybe you could provide your opinions or critiques on it at that point, just so we have something visual to go off of.
So what are we discussing right now?
A hybrid.
Because we have a bunch of different hybrid options
Yeah.
presented right now. We have
Yeah.
one, I guess kind of what we discussed last meeting, everything to 4 feet. It's not a hybrid. Channel with a U to homeowners, and then as a third option, channel to 4 feet, and then a lesser depth for the rest of the pond. Was that the other option, or?
And I kind of see, to Tim's point, leaving some areas undisturbed and then doing a lesser depth to the actual private landowners. But to your point, I think one of the things that really hasn't been discussed as much is potentially additional dredging along the publicly owned shorelines of the mill pond. That hasn't really been discussed as an option or shown as an option. So
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to delineate several options, but
I'm just thinking ahead is we owe City Council a report, and I think we need to at least let them know what the options are we're discussing. If we're not at the point now, which I don't think we are, of coming to a decision. So I think we should probably, as a board, clarify what the different options we're thinking about considering.
And this is a new option that kind of popped up.
if I may then, so what I could say is, I think whatever hybrid option is being discussed at this point, it is not fleshed out enough to actually, there needs to be a visual representation of what a hybrid option would be.
Thank you.
So we have option one being
Yeah, I-
4-foot dredge by default,
Yep.
surface area of the mill pond. Option two being a 50-foot channel from the mill pond to the actual Rock Lake channel itself. Third option, do nothing, leave it as is, leave it natural, no disturbance. Fourth option being a hybrid variation to do what we can. Now, I wouldn't go too far detailed into that hybrid one, because when you start fractioning that hybrid one, there's so many different various options that we can do. Perhaps this hybrid one, you could say, this is a hybrid, we would like further research done, we would like to maybe ask some consultants what the best option or what the most viable option would be for a hybrid option, but here are the priorities that we're trying to reach within this hybrid option.
Well, and this goes to Mary and the people on the city council. This is gonna, whatever it's gonna be, cost money. I mean, the option of do nothing costs the least money, except for it's not very good for use, because it's shallow in spots and shore owners can't fish on it, and I mean, citizens can't fish and those sorts of things. We know right now, we've extrapolated the costs from 2018 to 2024 to 2025. So we have a pretty good idea of what these things are going to cost, the different options that have been delineated out there. So I guess if one of the costs is the dredging and disposal of the dredge, the sludge, the less we take, the cheaper it's going to be. Again, I'm projecting that. I don't know that for sure.
It's a fair assumption.
I think it's a fair assumption, because volume is costly. So if we can come up with some sort of proposal that says we know these other options, we know the costs. If we can come up with what is the cost if we do the dredging from the channel to the launch, as we know that cost, but then do a dredge to maybe 3 feet along the city-owned property and along the shore owner's property, so they can get their boats stored and still have access to the water. That, I think that would be a good cost to get.
And we don't have that.
Right.
I think that would probably just with because correct me if I'm wrong here, we've been predicting the cost estimates off of Strand's report with inflation estimates.
Yep.
That option, I don't think we're going to be able to delineate from the options that are listed in Strand.
Couldn't you really roughly, this is like rough, say you're almost doing a double 50-foot swatch. If you do the circle, I'm just looking at this really neat aerial. If you were to do a 50-foot to the launch, and you're kind of wrapping another 50
4 feet.
foot.
The
4 foot, 4
deep,
foot.
okay.
And you're kind of almost doing another the same same width, same length, plus a little bit of, you're almost doubling the 50-foot
But doing it at 3 feet.
swatch.
The second.
The second one at 3 feet.
Okay.
But roughly, but you have a
Yeah.
little further, because you have to wrap the circle
Sure,
past the
that's true.
launch.
And then the
that's
310
rough, but-
feet of city-owned shoreline.
Yeah, it's rough, but it's just, it'd at least be a, rather than spending money to get something precise or to ask someone to, when we're still just chewing on, what does this buy us on the big scheme of things? It buys more people to launch, and is that really going to help utilization? Do we want utilization because we don't have good parking? I mean, that's kind of the questions, like back to the goals on, that'll solve some problems and it might be economically feasible, but is it really the vision of what we want? Because I think that does meet some of the goals I heard early on, but it doesn't trade off something else that we don't like. It helps with the plants.
Mary, you're looking at, or maybe McCray, so what are we talking about? What is the cost of the dredging the 50 foot right now? Was that the 2 million or 5, or what was that?
So I guess, yeah,
I've
been looking at the OPCC, not at the actual, less value in the actual value, more value in comparing the options. Because
427,000.
these are just guesses. Who knows what the actual cost is going to be, but this should be somewhat accurate
Depending what you do.
Yeah, I'm just
the
looking.
comparison.
Oh
we're looking
yeah,
at.
let's go next year.
Sorry, I was talking, I forgot your question.
The cost.
What's the cost of the 50 foot channel?
Right now, 427
This year.
this year, 2024.
So
This
I-
wouldn't be a 2024 project.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's
I
400,
think
so
just-
440, 440.
I
is-
was,
is-
so about
Safe to
500,
assume
about $500,000.
$500,000.
All right, so if we, and then the dredging it to 4 feet was what, 3 million or 4?
3 million.
3 million. So if we were to do go into a pretty good idea, if we go to let's go 1.5 times. So you'd add another 500,000 and then another 250 because it's not exactly, it's a little more than double.
Should be about $1 million.
Right, it's a little more, if we do the loop as we're talking about, that's a little more than twice the 50-foot trench, right?
I
Or
can
not
give you
trench.
some just rough.
Yeah,
Okay, so the 50-foot channel to the bridge, from the boat launch to the bridge is, I wrote 10.
453,000, right? That's
So I'm looking at
2026.
length, just to
Oh, the length.
get some estimates. I'm trying to get length per foot, or cost per foot, and then we can get an estimate for the rest. So 660 feet to 4. No, we know 4 to 3 feet.
Right, if-
Three
well,
feet.
this is gonna be right, it's for the dam. This is gonna be a,
Dollars per feet. 170.
well, McCray is working on the numbers. I'm going to go back to what the needs are of the city council. I'm going to guess they don't just need to wing it, it's about. So I think we want to make sure whatever we do, there's concrete numbers, because more than likely this is have to go to a referendum and all sorts of other stuff. So I guess,
If I may, just in the resolution for this assignment, you ask for a progress report every 6 months. So you don't have to have your final recommendation, but the council would want to hear from you at one of the joint meetings.
yes.
No,
We're
I will
opening more
say
doors.
At your first 6-month report, that was kind of at the point to where we had heard from presenters, we had collected data, and that was your data collection update. Now we have an additional 6 months. You have taken the data that you have received, you have begun forming some of your opinions. That would be my thought.
So we're thinking about this before this meeting. I think what we owe to City Council is what we've done so far as information collecting, and if we don't have, which we don't, the option selected, we should have a pretty good idea of the options we're considering. Is that, Lisa,
And
not to
why?
put you on the spot?
And why?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, you also did public comment since your last report, so.
Yes.
I think that's very fair.
So could you restate that, pretty what you said, what you think we owe them?
What we've done so far as information collecting, public comment, I made a list of just going off of, I've got too many pieces of paper here.
Expert presentations.
So what I have is, and I think there might be more to add to this that I just missed. It's the wrong meeting, sorry. I'm off here. May. We obtained ecological information from Jefferson County, from Patricia and Colton. We got historical imagery and documentation from, you got that from the Historical Society, Lake Mills Historical Society?
Several sources, yeah.
And then you got some from just community members as well. Costs, as we were discussing, we applied annual averages from inflation to the OPCC that was included with the Strand report. We gathered public input at a hearing in January. Eric got input from the fire department about how maintenance and improvements to the mill pond would affect their ability to respond to incidents. Got an example permit application from the recently completed mill pond channel dredging. And then we also just gathered general public input through emails.
And we had the Wilkie report and analyzed the Wilkie report.
Yes. And Mike, I can send this to you if you
Please.
don't want to write it all down.
Can't read it anyway, my writing, so.
So those are the things that I listed. Was there anything that, like, major information gathering, public input gathering, things that were listed as our goals in the city council resolution that I missed listing off there?
I think that was pretty accurately described.
Okay. All right, so some really rough math here. For the 50-foot channel to 4 feet, and I'm just using the 2026 numbers, that is 453,000. 53,000. And so that length was from the boat launch to the bridge was 660 feet. So that gets us to $257 per foot for a 50-foot channel that is 50 feet wide, or 50 foot wide channel to 3 feet. Doing just a quick measurement of a loop around the mill pond that would run along the city-owned property on Veterans Lane up, and then along the north shore to the all the private landowners' docks, and then back down to meet up with the channel. That is approximately 1,500 feet. So that would add, using the $257 per foot, would be $385. That doesn't make
That
sense.
seems low.
Yes, that is low. I think I missed a zero.
So you're talking about the 4 foot, the initial 50-foot channel, correct?
Yep.
You did that, yeah.
Right, that's 4 feet, okay.
That was 4 feet deep.
I think the area you're talking about, the city
Then he's
owned.
going here, and then he's going to the
257.
right by
No, we
the-
can also request, we can compile this data too
Down
afterwards
here
if you
is not-
request.
Down here's the dam, and here's.
We're getting
VFW.
an idea for the public. That's how they
That would
would
be
and for the council.
Here.
Yes.
Yeah, so that would be 385,000 for just the 3 feet. The additional 1,500 feet, so total would be plus 170, 23, and that is the 3 feet.
So we
The
total,
extra
total
would
be
be-
how much?
170 plus
3,950.
385, 50. That would be, let me just make sure that's right, 550, approximately 550,000.
Wait a minute, you're adding
Instead of
385
3
to 453?
So I was looking at the Mill Pond 50-foot channel. No, I did my math wrong.
Right.
Sorry, I'm an
Yeah,
engineer and I should.
So it's 453 plus 385, right?
Yeah.
That's
Sorry, I used.
Math under pressure is always
453,
Say 850.
850, compared to
Roughly.
3.1 million. So
Yes,
that's
okay.
much more palatable.
So,
And it
sorry,
balances
sorry.
some
Wait.
I'm causing a lot of
in our
confusion here.
Interests.
Let's just get the numbers here.
Okay, so a 4-foot channel from the Ferry Street Bridge to the boat launch, that costs $453.
In 2026.
2026.
Yep.
Okay.
And just for clarity, that's 4 feet deep, 660
Yes.
feet
Yep,
long, and
yep.
50 feet wide.
Okay, so the difference was I was using this calculation for a 3-foot depth for the 1,500 feet that runs along Veterans Lane along the north side and back. So that cost is $257 per foot.
Okay.
So that gets you to the additional $385,000. So that is what gets added to 453.
So Colton, and putting you on the spot there, but is your feeling as for the health of the mill pond and the aquatics and such, 3 feet is better than 4 feet?
You're talking for just doing like the channels and stuff?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to change that much. I was kind of talking about, when I was talking about like the health of the lake and like kind of the steepness, I was talking about like when you were talking about doing like a 4-foot depth throughout
Everything,
the entire
okay,
thing.
all right, so we're fine with that.
Yep.
And what depth was 3 feet, length was 1,500 feet? And how wide did you say it was?
So that's 50
50.
feet.
All right, and I don't know if it needs to be 50 feet in that loop either.
If we stray outside of 50 feet, then the math becomes.
Yeah, but if you go in less than that.
Well,
then
I think riparian owners would desire to have as short a pier as possible because
Yes.
they're very expensive.
Yes.
And so I think
Yes.
it'd be enough for them to get out and be able to turn and
Yes.
safely
Right.
make
You'll
it
pull out
to the
and- yeah,
channel.
that's a very good thought,
Yeah,
Mary.
yeah.
But also, I agree, I think the more we keep it open in the middle for everybody, and then the boats will know, kind of the channel, I think that will be a good option to explore.
I think that was an interesting thought because it balances. a
Shocked
lot
you
of
after
different-
working with me for all those years.
Oh, I'm impressed. No, you still got it. You still got it.
So I just want to circle back to the options that we're considering. And all the options that we've discussed, are we firm that we want a 4-foot channel from the boat launch to the Ferry Street Bridge? Am I correct in that being my understanding?
Yes, for me.
Yes. Others?
I think 4 foot, yeah.
I can support that because given that's the primary way the water's running because the water's leading to the dam, I can support 4 feet for that channel.
Okay.
I think 3 feet is, to my point on the water, boat usage is adequate. I think that channel does carry some unique priority, I guess, and the way it serves multi-purpose. And the water, that's the way the water is always going.
Right. Well, and to Eric's comment, it's already filling in a little bit. So again, I'm looking at this as a 30-year project. If you're looking at 1992 was the last time this was done, I think the 4 feet will give us that longer ability that will always be good.
Yes.
Anita, what did you think about that?
Yeah.
Well, based on everything, and all the confusion.
Flipping the coin.
One of the things that Attorney Drescher was mentioning is that we, have to, that he feels that some of the backflow, if you will, with the current situation is causing some troubles with the wastewater treatment plant, if I understood. I mean, that's kind of simplifying it. So I guess I would support what is being proposed on the 4-foot. But I do feel that the points Colton made about 3 feet and the Eurasian milk, that foil stuff, whatever, and then also the fact that there are some special species, fish species that we need to have variety of depths for, and turtles, and so I like this concept, the way that we're looking at it, and it's less expensive.
Yes. All right,
is
I'm going to try to narrow us down even more, if it is appropriate.
Very appropriate.
For the hybrid options we're discussing, for all options, are we considering at least some additional dredging outside of the 50-foot channel, or do we want to still consider just the 50-foot channel, no dredging for the rest of the pond? From the options, I guess, that we've discussed, that from what I've heard, all have included some additional dredging outside of the 50-foot channel, but I don't want to assume.
I thought we talked about the shoreline, about the city-owned shoreline. Did you include that in your circle calculation, or?
Yes, that was
Oh, that was
included
included
within the
already.
1,500
Okay.
additional
Okay.
feet.
But right now, what I believe McCray is asking is, right now, what that's on thing is, right, the channel, 50 foot, 4 feet deep, 660 feet from launch to channel.
Yes.
The rest of it, staying the way it is.
How
Right.
many feet wide is the whole, I don't even know, how wide is the
I'd
whole
have-
pond?
I can
Do you
tell
have
you.
GIS up?
I'm just measuring off of Google Maps, so it's all.
Yeah, I'm
So
trying
what
to
is,
picture.
is that what you're asking, McCray?
So what
Yeah,
I'm
so how is 50
specifically
like
trying
this, or
to
is it
clarify
that? What does 50
is
look
for
like?
this report to City Council, I want to tell them I think the board should be telling them the options we're considering. And are we considering not doing any additional dredging outside of the 50-foot channel from the boat launch to the ferry drive?
My response is yes, we are considering that.
We are considering no additional dredging outside of the 50.
Outside the
Okay.
50, 650 feet, 4 feet deep,
Okay.
for the $485,000.
So that's one option we're considering.
Correct. You're pondering.
Yes. So what I'm trying to clarify is I think I maybe didn't word this right. For the hybrid options, is just the just the 50-foot channel, the 4-foot deep 50-foot channel, is that one of the options we're considering, or, because that's not a hybrid option, that's one of the options listed in the report.
Correct.
So, for that 50-foot channel, I'm trying to describe the hybrid options we're discussing, and that's not a hybrid option.
Correct. That's an option that's already listed.
Okay, so we are considering for the hybrid options additional dredging beyond.
Yes.
Okay.
The channel. I don't think we are saying the 50-foot channel alone is a no. It's only a 50-foot channel with the additional riparian owner dredging in the city. Is that how I understood? We didn't go back to the.
What I'm trying to
I'm trying to-
take 50 foot, if this is how the board feels, for clarification for the city council, that we are not considering just a 50-foot channel. Or are we
Correct.
still considering just a 50-foot channel?
I think we could present that, and here's the cost, and then here's the downside of it. And I think the downside of that would be, it's still gonna have the people that don't have access from the shoreline. They don't
Okay.
have the,
If I may, you can list several options, and then as a board, you can vote on a recommended preferred option.
Exactly. I think we
That's
need
the way
give
to
them-
kind of
yep.
present it to council,
Yep.
in my opinion. I like to provide options. Here's an A, B, and C. However, I propose option B because,
Here's why.
yes.
And do we need to make that vote tonight? No.
No,
Okay.
not at all.
But I think what McCrae's asking, so that is one of the options that will
I
be
got it.
presented
Yeah,
to the
okay.
city council. Perhaps not the preferred
Yeah.
option.
Okay.
but
So-
one
I
of the
just want to make
options
sure I'm
considered.
understanding.
What I have listed as the options that we are considering right now is do nothing, 4 foot dredging for the whole mill pond, the 50-foot channel to 4 feet between the Ferry Street Bridge and the boat launch, and the fourth option is the hybrid option, which is the 4 feet from Ferry Street Bridge to the boat launch with some additional dredging, possibly to a lesser depth, but outside of the options that were proposed in the Strand report. Is that factual?
Let me go over that again. So option number 1 is do nothing.
Do nothing.
Do nothing?
Option number 2 is 4 foot,
The whole
4
thing.
feet everything, all the currently water covered
Yes.
stuff. Third option is 4 foot dredging of a 50-foot
Foot channel,
channel.
all
Yep.
From the bridge to the fire department, basically.
Yep.
And then the fourth is 50-foot channel, 4 feet deep, plus additional dredging.
Yes.
Right? Okay. And we don't have to decide which of those hybrid options.
Yes, I think that we could present to the council that we've come up with another option potentially, and
Yeah.
we can talk about why, we can talk about the costs. I think what we want to do is, as best we can, put numbers to things. So McCrae's done a really nice job about, we're talking 660 feet, 50 feet wide, 4 feet deep, and that's going to cost right now X amount of dollars. We're then talking about, if you go to that option of the fingers, or some made of the fingers, 3 feet deep, each one, we can do the math on that. You know,
Okay.
go into the landowners' places. If we just did dredging 3 feet deep along the city-owned property, both on the east side of Ferry Drive and the west side of Veterans Lane, we could come up with a number on that. But that would increase access for the public. And then the other option is just to do a loop, including Ferry Drive, Veterans Lane, and landowners. And then we can talk about the reason for that one. Again, I'm talking for myself. Preferred is that one, it minimizes the pier's length into the mill pond, which then frees up it for use on all sorts of other things. But also, as Mary says, people can get in and out, back in, come in, and everybody plays nice. So,
That's
though
what Craig-
but I think we should put depth, width, and length to match up with all the numbers.
Okay.
Because that's what people are going to make decisions on. What's it's going to cost me.
Yeah. And McCrae, you're tabulating this.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Tim, I might need you to repeat some
Bless you.
stuff, but 3 foot fingers to
Thank you for doing all that.
property owners. Okay, so I'm specifically on the hybrid options right now, and all these include the 4 feet, 4 feet deep from the Ferry Street Bridge to the boat launch, with first one 3 foot deep, 1,500 foot loop along the edge. That was the one that I calculated the cost. That the whole total cost came up to $838,000. You mentioned 3 foot deep fingers to property owners.
Yes, because that was proposed by someone.
Okay, I can get a cost estimate for that. Estimate. You listed off at least one other one, and I was writing.
And that was just the access to along the property owned by the city on
Along the
Veterans and the property owned by the city on Ferry Drive.
Foot deep along. Did you say along Ferry Street or just along Veterans Drive?
Both.
Okay.
City-owned shoreline frontage.
How much really is there by Ferry Drive? Oh,
There's
okay,
a fairly
some.
substantial
Okay.
Quite a
amount.
bit. The whole park really to the south of
Yeah,
the
pretty much the
north
park
of the
boundary.
bridge. Probably not to the north though, right?
There's a decent amount because you also have the eastward running section, and then you have the northward running section.
Right.
So there's kind of an actual
Yeah.
backwards L shape of city-owned property on that
Yep,
side.
that's right.
Are there any other hybrid options that I missed there?
Any other hybrid options that have not been listed?
And I'm sorry, but all these are going to be 50-foot wide, just to make my math easy.
No, that's fine. That's why I thought Mary brought up a very good point. If you make them 50-foot wide, people can go back and forth, and then you got room for everybody.
So, issue, 50-foot wide fingers to property owners is
Intersects.
pretty much just going to be the whole thing.
Yeah, that's.
Well, then we
like
that's
can
not an option.
analyze that and see what they're talking about as far as fingers, but.
I can,
Yeah, I don't know that that's an option.
My thought is you could omit that as an option as a board if you're not willing to pursue that one or you don't consider it as a viable option.
All right,
you could
done.
omit it.
I think it's too complicated.
Yes, I agree.
There we
okay.
go.
I just wanted to bring it up
Yeah,
because
it's
it was
too-
mentioned.
I don't know how
3
that
foot
would
fingers is,
Fingers are out of the pie.
Okay.
so,
And by default, you can omit it.
all right. So we have two hybrid options listed, and I can get the math done as far as the cost for. I can actually do that right now,
Okay.
but don't stare at me.
There is still another option, but it is really out of the box again. If we, I'm still pondering on that launch. It is not ideal. The parking spots. Are we going to invest in it and make it worthy and want to make it a revenue generator, or do we want to repurpose that space? I drive by Bartles Beach, and there are a lot of vehicles with, I'm back on the kayaks, and the space being low motor. It'll have 12 possible motorboats on it, for sure, because these homeowners will have access if we dredge over on that shoreline, but just maybe 12. And small boats that can get underneath it. We don't have to be one size fits all for everybody, but small boats that can get underneath the current bridge, which may be the size of the bridge forever, depending on what our vision is. But if you see the number of vehicles with all of their kayaks, and they're pulling them out onto that little narrow curve on South Ferry, and they're taking their kayaks out and they're putting them in right next to the beach, next to the little, and Eric, you might nod your head on some of this because you probably are working there and see some of this happening. I could envision the parking as I'm looking at this overhead aerial being beautiful for single vehicles with their kayaks coming off the tops or off the backs of their cars. It's less complicated than boats with their trailers. And this could be repurposed as you were talking about the park. I haven't been in the Lions Park Marshall concept where you have accessibility for a different type of watercraft. Given we have boat launches in multiple places elsewhere on the lake, but it's a completely different way of thinking about the purpose. Gets back to the goals, the purpose of how we would utilize. And then you can still have, with kayaks, you can still paddle through all different kinds of plant species and whatnot. But that is different. Then I wouldn't necessarily dredge the way that we're thinking about dredging. I would make sure we have the right kind of path based on how the dam requires the water to flow, that we're not upsetting something that would cause the dam to be at risk, or I know it's a whole different, and I'm bringing up Pandora's box. You have all done so much work, but I'm coming in without having any, I was creating my own ideas.
One thing
along
is
the way.
option A and B, remember we talked about that? Because that includes some of that, right? That, from the Strand report, remember?
My thoughts are and I don't want to overcomplicate or anything else either, but I feel like we really have delineated a short-term versus long-term plan.
Okay.
I feel like if you were to pursue just non-motorized watercraft access for the short-term plan, I think that would by default kind of fall under the do nothing currently.
Yeah.
Because we've kind of said dredging is a short-term thing. If we want to pursue long-term options for just having non-motorized watercraft, I think that option for long-term advancement would fall under the do nothing in just regards to dredging. I don't know, maybe.
Well, I was trying to get the riparian owners that I know have expressed interest. So there was, I don't know that I would do the same, the channel and the loop and the circle. Would you just do the public areas and the riparian owners? So it would be just to have, I'm just thinking out loud a little bit. If you didn't need motorboat access from that launch, would you do the 50-foot dredge? That's just a question that I have.
the,
And maybe it is the best, in the best interest just to do the dredge regardless of the ideation of how, like, the future, like you're saying, Eric, maybe it's okay. There's no harm, but it's just, it'd be good for all visionary ideas on how we use it.
and to Mary's comment, but to your expertise, a lot of this is the flow. We want to make the flow not get turbulent or anything like that from Rock Lake down to the
Dam.
stream that's right there, correct? So if we don't have some sort of good channel from there to there, isn't that going to be a problem of it eroding the banks and such?
You're still going to have water flow. I do believe that. I mean, eventually, how long is it going to take for the mill pond to get sedimented in? I'm not quite sure, but you still have an access of flowing water through it by default because you have an outlet. You have an outlet to a water body.
The only outlet.
You have the only outlet to a water body.
So
I
with
still
that,
think you're going to
so
have
the straight line or curve, what I hear, doesn't really matter, as long as it can flow in.
As
and
long
out.
as it can flow in. I mean, when we go through periods of seasonal change within the water level, so when it switches to a fall level, when we actually have to draw the water level down, there's increased water flow that runs through the mill pond, through the dams, through Rock Creek. Now what that does in turn is kind of flush some of that sediment out, but it's through that flowing channel of water. What that does to the rest of the body of water, I'm not quite sure, but there's never been an issue to where we haven't been capable or limited to receive flow through that channel. I mean, right now when we have minimal flow underneath, it does get silted in. But when we go through seasonal change, we still have the capacity to have additional water flow through the channel. So I'm not quite sure, but I just think because there is by design an outlet, I think we are still capable of having water flow through the mill pond regardless of dredging.
If we dredge, though, will we remove that silt? Because that's a risk or a con to not dredge. You know what I'm saying? Is if
Yeah.
dredging will help that, then there's other reasons other than navigability from the launch.
I still
That's
think
what
by
I'm trying to get my
default,
thoughts.
I still think by default, unless you were to go to bedrock or anything like that, I still think there would be flowing silt going
No matter.
towards the outlet because it is the only avenue of flowing water through the
Okay.
channel. That's my thought. I don't know if that makes sense,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
that's the
that
direction
makes,
it's
that
flowing.
makes sense when you think about water
Yeah,
movement.
that's the
but-
direction
okay.
it is going to flow.
Yeah, that makes sense because I mean there are other ways that some other lakes do it where they actually do like these drawdowns, but they're like for a few years, and that's like another way that they kind of like try and get some of that soft sediment to move out. They do like a 2 or 3 year long drawdown to get a lot of that compaction, and then when they fill back up, a lot of that sediment or the sediment going out as they're slowly doing a drawdown to get some of that sediment out as well. But I don't think that would be a very good issue, especially
With the public comments about the water level
Yeah.
last year, I don't think
don't even want.
I can't vote for that.
Yeah, I don't think, regardless if there's a recommendation made to dredge the mill pond or not, I don't think it would impair our ability to have water flow through it.
And I understand that. What I'm also, we've talked about this when it comes to the piers and such at Sandy Beach, is we want to make sure we don't become elitist. And one of the things that I've heard is that one thing that people really like about launching their fishing boat at the mill pond is that they don't have to deal with the big, huge boats
That's true.
down at Sandy Beach.
It's a different user group.
It's a different user. And there's a lot of people that I think if we shut it down and made it only watercraft,
Kayaks or something.
kayaks and canoes,
Okay.
I think there'd be people that said, now you've really pushed this down to the place. And
That's fair. That's good feedback.
Yeah,
That's really good feedback.
and I think most people that do use the mill pond are comfortable with knowing that parking is limited.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
From
Good
my
to know.
understanding, there's not
Thanks,
been
Tim.
an issue noticed by myself or the fire department where there's so much traffic built up on Veterans Lane that it has impaired their response.
Right.
I don't think that has happened yet.
Yeah,
from
they do.
anyone's, thoughts, but the same thing is if you increase the amount of navigability to the mill pond, do you therefore increase the amount of traffic to the mill pond?
Right.
I don't know.
Well, I'm just looking at the cost per user, and I'm trying to get my head wrapped around utilization and cost. And so when you're dredging, I don't know the volume of people utilizing that launch. I know we have 12 homeowners or 12 property owners, and so when you start to look at what we're up to, short of $1 million, I'm just wanting, trying to also think about.
It would take substantial decades to recoup the cost from
Yeah.
boat launching.
I know. Well, yeah, and I'm
if
not suggesting
yeah.
we turn it into some boat launch in that regard, but I'm.
And I'm
trying to wrap my
I'm
head
just going
around.
anecdotally. There are quite a few people that fish that use that launch.
Yep, that is true. And some actual specific fishermen, like I know there's a lot of carp fishermen there who do bow fish on the actual water body. That is a designated spot to where they're able to do that form of recreation. So it's a
Which is
unique
good.
aspect. So
Yeah.
And I think they also really like if they do get one of those PMO spots that are on Veterans Lane, guess what? They don't have to walk very far.
Yeah.
Versus if you go over to Sandy Beach, you might have a little bit of a hike. Yes.
That's true.
Yeah, and some will park up by me during July, so that's almost a 3/4 mile away. All right, so McCree, are we okay with where we are as far as recommendations and numbers and
Yep.
such?
So I have options and I have cost estimates. Do nothing. I had $0 there. 4 foot whole mill pond. It's basically 3.1 million. 4 foot deep, 50-foot channel from the bridge to the boat launch is 450,000. And then the two hybrid options, the 3 foot depth, 1,500 foot loop along basically the north edge and back. That option is 840,000, and the 3 foot depth, I don't know what to call them. I guess along the roadway, the publicly owned Ferry Drive and Veterans Lane, that total option is 633,000. And so I don't want to complicate this, Eric. So I see you provided some more
beneficial use versus
Yes.
disposal.
But so what I can't use that, and that was for 4 foot, the whole thing. I can't. That's if I apply that to the 4 foot, it's not comparable to the other options. So I'm just gonna forget about this for now. But I think in our report, I can summarize that there could be the cost could be lesser if we can utilize some beneficial reuse.
Yes, and that is a very large variable because to what extent can it be beneficially reused? I don't know.
Yes.
The types of beneficial reuse are normally field fertilization. Now, how much of that material or removed material can be used for agricultural purposes? What parties would be able to take it? What parties can take it? By default, we normally just, we did the landfill excavation. It was the conservative. It was the higher number. There is a potential lesser cost, but then again, it would be near impossible to find an equilibrium between that. So both of these two columns on the updated Strand OPCC are saying all removed sediment, the entire removed volume of sediment is beneficial reuse, or the entire volume of removed sediment is landfill.
Yeah.
I don't think either is. There will be some. What I think is, we as a city, if this were to move forward, if it were to be permitted and were to go forward to actual project implementation, we would pursue beneficial reuse as an option, but it would be a very large variable.
Yes. So I'm not even going to try to throw a percentage. I'm just going to say it can reduce the cost.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So just trying to get us back on track to this report that we owe to City Council. I need to clean it up, but I have basically a summary of what we've done so far and the options we're considering. Is there any other major subject areas that City Council would like? Lisa, I don't want to throw you on the spot.
Well, I think, yeah, maybe next steps. What do you think you're doing next? And if you have a tentative timeline.
Is there anything discussed on how it's paid for, whether there's like some riparian owner tax?
That hasn't been discussed at Parks Board yet.
I guess,
Okay, or I don't know
Yeah.
how that part,
my opinion, that is maybe outside of the Parks
Committee.
Board.
Okay.
We
And-
spend the money, we don't raise it.
You recommend the spending of the money, and then at that point, we figure out what funding sources there are. I do kind of agree with McCray. You know, if there's a recommendation from the Parks Board, City Council says, yes, we really like this recommendation, but at this point, we need to figure out what funding sources there are.
Okay.
Additional report given to City Council, and then potential approval or denying. I don't know if that's correct, but at that point, I
Okay.
would say the funding sources would most likely be at the City Council level and city staff.
All right, so I guess for next steps is narrow down the options that we have presented. Anyone want to throw out a month that we can commit to having a final option selected?
Do you feel comfortable in an additional 6 months? So say at the end of 2024, you can say, here's our recommendation, or you push it
No, I
one
think
year?
We could do
I
so.
think
In
we could.
June,
Well, I don't
in
know
June
how
will be
December
1
goes.
year as of resolution adoption. So you could say one additional year or 6 months after this one. So you could say at the end of this or this calendar year could be an option, or the next option would be June of 25.
What
I
is-
personally think we can wrap this up within 2, maybe 3 months.
So
I was gonna say, yeah,
six.
what else is needed to actually make a decision, to weigh the different options? We could put them on a chart and, like.
I would
go ahead,
say
Larry.
formalization of opinions. I would say the best one. So we have all these
Yeah.
options on the table. What's the preferred option? Is I think
Just
at this
remind
point.
them short-term and long-term, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
If you say 6
completing
months-
The whole assignment versus maybe. the
Yes.
part-time
Fair.
duties.
Yeah.
If you ask for 6, you can do it in 3.
Sure.
But if you ask for 3.
So
you
that would
gotta
actually
do
be
it
a goal for Parks Board. Perhaps you say, let's flesh out our short-term recommendation within 6 months. And then at that point, you could say, at 6 months, here's our recommendation for a short-term goal. And then to complete this assignment, you could say, at that point, we have eliminated our short-term goal. Here's our recommendation. Now we shift our focus onto long-term
Long-term.
goals.
Like it.
Okay, so narrow down short-term recommendation by December 2024. Even, I think we can probably get it done before that, but
12/24.
December
Short.
2024,
Short term by the end of the year, you
yeah.
say?
yeah.
Or summer.
December 2024. And then long-term June 2025, or, I mean, we can obviously go ahead of these timelines, but.
Yes, I'm looking at.
You could just say, you could just say long-term goals and evaluations are a recommendation to follow at that point.
Okay, long-term.
So if we were to recommend a solution to the city council and they approve, how long does it take to get this set up, and what is the ideal month you'd want to do the project? So maybe we should back up to make sure our date to get to city council helps us to do the best,
It will-
accomplish the project.
There's that, and then I see right now, as we're doing it right now, we're drafting our capital improvement requests and project requests for 25. Those are due for city staff basically at the end of June. Final draft proposal from the city manager for city budget is August, proposed to council in November. By default, you're basically looking at 26 potential funding at the earliest if you were to move forward with this recommendation.
Yeah.
So by the time Parks Board gives a recommendation at the end of this calendar year, funding for 25 has already been removed.
But if we give our short-term recommendation before, let's say by September, we have finalized what we want at that point.
You could, it would be difficult, because like I said, final budget is approved in November at city council. Preliminary budget for city staff is August at the latest, and we're trying to even move that up even a little
Okay.
bit further into July.
So when would we need, if we were going to try to get it in, would we need to get it by July? By
Basically
July?
June.
June,
Yeah,
July.
basically
By
June. Yeah,
By
now.
June?
Yeah, within June, for the most part.
Well, that could be an unwritten goal, but
I sort of hate to keep pushing this off.
yes.
Well,
I mean,
the
the next thing we
prices are
could
just
do,
gonna go
though,
up.
is within my capital improvement requesting process, I mean, I, as a city staff member, say, here's a potential project for next year's budget cycle, and it is purely a request. It is either approved or denied at the city manager level. I could say, hey, here's the potential cost of this project for next year's budget cycle. I could throw it in as a capital request for a very rough estimate amount of dollars, and I can at least include it in my 2025 capital improvement request.
You know, Anita, we're not really kicking it down there. I mean, we will have done our bit.
Well,
And
I
remember, it's also
understand.
going to take a long time to get the grants, go through Department of Transportation, Agriculture, DNR. It's going to be a while.
Yeah.
It will be, like I said, to the channel dredging project, I feel like was pushed down because of staffing problems within the state, like the actual State Department at that time. But it was an 18-month process from the point of submittal to approval.
18 months?
Yeah, and that is longer than normal
Yeah.
for that kind of processes, but I would say a permitting process, year, probably.
So if we have 4 options here.
Wow.
One of them is the whole pond to 4 feet is 3 million. The rest are all
Under-
below $1 million.
Yep.
So if we even get to the point where we eliminate, if that's the direction we want to go, if we eliminate 4 feet, then by June, I don't know if you need how precise of numbers you need, but there's a big difference between 3 million and less than a
850.
It
million.
would be an ambitious request.
Okay, all right.
I can submit though. My thoughts are, if I submit capital funding requests, it is a request. What is the worst that comes from submitting a request is the recipient no. You know, and it's, again, there's really not much harm in submitting a request. Is my thought.
If they say no this year, does that mean would that prejudice their decision
Not at all.
following? No.
Nope,
Okay.
not the
Just
slightest.
a timing
it's
or
all
other
timing.
things
Yeah.
on the
May-
It's all
plate.
budgeting, all time.
May I ask a couple questions and I agree with Anita, and this has been going on since 2018.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, the pushing it back and the pushing it back, and there's a whole myriad of reasons, I'm sure, as to why no one really want to make this decision, because some people aren't going to like it. And the other thing is, though, I do think that we should be able to make a recommendation and go for the $1 million at this point, realizing that we've got to get something out there because we have no idea that the DNR is going to approve the whole thing.
Yeah.
That is
we gotta
also
get
correct.
working on that.
So
part.
that
I
is
agree, Tim.
one of the options is we put in all of this work, resources, etc. And again, it's like the capital improvement request process. This application is a request, is an application. It can be denied.
See,
And
so,
that's parallel with the budget thing. So that was the request to the DNR.
My
would that
thoughts are
proceed?
I wouldn't submit a permit if I don't have funding.
Good, okay.
And I would say funding would be a prerequisite for me to even submit a permit.
so
'Cause there's substantial amounts of effort and
That they
staff
have to
time
do.
involved for a permit. I'm not going to dedicate that unless there's funding source.
So in the interest of time and moving things forward, I'm wondering if the meetings for the city council are what, June 12th or something like that?
June 4th or June 18th?
Right.
Your choice.
So June 4th, June 18th, our next meeting is June 19th.
Is it? Is that the right date?
So,
We still
Scheduled
have to-
meeting, but then again, you
We
would
still
have
have
to
to
do
talk
special
about our
meeting.
date.
right, so, yes, thank you. So, there might be a potential for a special meeting, and where I'm talking out loud here is, would it be helpful for us to make some request to the city council to say, you've heard this, Mary, you've heard this, are we on the right track with the $1 million deal, or less, you know, those options, forget about the dredging, the $4 million. But I also, do we have a concern, is this at a capital, enough of a capital outlay that it'd have to go to a referendum or anything like that?
It's not a building, so
it's not a building, or it's not, so we don't have to worry about it going to a public vote. So that wouldn't slow down anything. So I guess what I would say is maybe we consider presenting our findings at the June 18th meeting,
City council.
city council meeting, and try to get a special meeting before then, that we can come up with here is our presentation and our recommendation.
So we come up with our final recommendation and a special meeting in first half of June.
For the short term.
Correct.
Short-term recommendations.
I think that's fair.
Yes.
I like that.
And then I don't think you even have to call it a special meeting, because as a board, and you actually as the chair, now you have the authority to call a special meeting.
We just
long as
by
there's a
ordinance have to
quorum.
meet once a month, right?
Yep.
We have to meet once a month on it.
We don't have to meet once a month.
Isn't that what it states in the?
If we have agenda items, then we do.
Okay.
But if there's nothing on the agenda, we don't meet just to meet.
Okay.
There's no cookies or coffee or anything like that.
So we're looking at 2 meetings in June?
So, to my knowledge, we won. So we'd have the special meeting, which we can maybe determine now when we can all be here. I've got to look at my calendar, because June is really goofy for
It
me.
is Dairy Month.
What you could,
I'm gone for a lot of us anyway.
what I would say is as the board, you can say, we will meet sometime in the first half of June prior to the June 18th city council meeting.
Yes.
It could be determined afterwards, and you could discuss your schedules via email, as long as there's not content or discussion items being talked about through email. If
Deciding
you're
the date.
purely discussing scheduling, that is fine.
But so we're not going to have an agenda. So for instance, that the people who wanted to speak about the Sandy Beach restaurant, would that occur at that special meeting?
It
Or
could.
would
It could.
Yeah, you
Certainly
you
could.
create the agenda, you absolutely
Yeah.
can. Tonight is technically a special meeting.
Right. We just have to let them know that the reason we're moving it before the 18th,
Right.
the ship has sailed, or the kayak is launched by then.
So you can put whatever you would like on that agenda.
Yeah.
So,
Because that, I mean, I think for their purposes, that would be better actually, because their whole point is they'd like to have something to us to see if we would support a note to the city council.
Yes.
And if the city council already decided, or the
Yes.
architecture's done.
So
there's no point.
I think for the work that McCray and we've done tonight, I think we have a pretty good idea of what our recommendations are, our options are, and our preferred recommendation. But all this is partly so that it could get into the capital
Okay.
budget, and this can get moving. Because I'd like to have it get moved and get rejected than to have it pushed down for another year and a half, which isn't helping anybody. And to your point too, is this is city resources that we're churning through.
Okay, so what you're proposing is we come prepared, ready to vote on a single option at whenever the meeting is, in the first half of June. Is that?
With the, yes, so then we can present our
Yes.
vote and
Okay.
findings to the city council.
I
On
definitely
the
feel
18th.
comfortable, like, coming to a decision for the short term, at that meeting in June. I feel like today we discussed some good options, and I want to mull on them a little bit.
Pros, cons, and
But-
risks, and
Yeah.
everyone. Yep.
because like Lisa said, technically in June, it's just your 6-month report. But as a board, you can make a recommendation, you give your recommendation at that meeting.
Yeah,
That's
I would very much for us, for the city council, for the citizens of Lake Mills, and for Colton to get this moved on. Because it's going to be, once again, there's going to be a whole bunch of more work when it comes to the long term
Yeah.
and all that.
Okay.
So I guess right now, I'm going to stay with the agenda as to, let's see, I'm going to push off on the discussion of Sandy Beach restaurant details. Is that okay? Do I have to get a vote on this, or what? Could I just say we're
I think you do. I think you just
alternate
defer.
agenda?
You're the boss.
All right.
Yeah, as long as you have unanimous
Yeah.
agreement.
And then discussion, Parks Board meeting details, again, we'll push that to another agenda. As far as,
I would say for here, you could basically just say Parks Board will meet at some point prior to the June 18th.
right.
City
We'll
council
we'll have
meeting.
a special meeting to be scheduled and notified. at least a week before the city council
Because,
ones.
yeah, you have to have enough time to write it all up and stuff.
Right, right. So we're looking at sometime, we got to have a meet, we want to have a meeting for us sometime first 2 weeks in June. And so with that, do we have time? Do we want, I'm sorry.
I mean, I can tell the clerk now to put this on the agenda for June
June
18th.
18th.
If you have any materials, we would need them by the 14th. That's
All right.
Friday before.
Wonderful.
Like if you had a PowerPoint or
Yes.
attachment.
Yes,
or something.
yes.
Or even our vote, even our recommendations would have to be by the 14th,
Yes.
right?
If you, anything that's written down, you know, any documents that you want to share ahead of time.
Yes, and you said that's Friday?
Friday the 14th.
All right, so let's give ourselves a little more buffer than that.
So for the report that's due, do we need that by the 14th, or is,
Yes,
Well,
you would.
Yeah.
in December, Tim gave a verbal progress report. He didn't have any documents, so
okay.
we didn't have to have anything ahead of time other than just putting it on the agenda. But you may have
Yeah, I think
something
I
in
think
writing
we'd have
this
some-
time. So
Yeah.
I think in writing
Single
with the
page.
numbers and
Okay.
and the map, maybe, something like that, we can
Yeah.
get at that.
So what I can
Pros and
do
cons
is-
for whatever we want to recommend.
Clean up, sorry.
I'm trying to get, one conversation, Mary, you said what?
Oh, I think a single page or a small little set
Yes.
of materials would be appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And McCray, your question was?
I will clean up what we've done so far, but I guess I'll leave it at that because by June, beginning of June, our goal is to have a single option. So, but I
Yes.
think that is important to include in the report to City Council as far as what we have done.
Yes.
Kind
It
of
would, it would be helpful when you go through these options, that's what we're going to mull over, because I'm kind of
Yes.
counting on what you've been writing up here.
Okay.
Right? Okay.
Do you need me to email you the 4 options?
Please.
Yes.
And I think everybody's going
Yes,
to want to see them
please.
before the minutes are done.
Okay.
I would say send it to me and I can distribute to all
Okay.
5 board members. I think that would be probably the best.
Better, okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Eric.
And if you have questions too or clarifying questions you need help with something, McCray, just let me know.
Because you can distribute to us and we
Yep.
can read it as long as we don't then go back and forth on emails saying, well, I like
Correct.
this one, you like that one.
Yep.
That we can't.
And
do.
as much as I can do to limit chain emails or group emails, that's
Right.
normally the best. And just going through me as an avenue for that normally just makes it a little bit easier.
I'm asking for it mostly so I can not have to write it up for
Correct.
minutes.
Is it,
All
would it be-
right, just while we're here, what I'd like to do is we could try to meet on the 3rd of June, which is the day before.
Monday.
No, that wouldn't give us a yeah, that'd be the day before the city council meeting.
18th is the city council.
I thought there was one, I thought there was one on the 4th, 6 p.m.
There is, but you can do it on the 18th.
Right, but I'm just saying for us just to meet, just us to meet. But that'd be before them. Then we could also meet on the 5th. No, I'm gone. I'm basically gone, vacation, out of the area from the 5th until the 13th.
So I would say by default, it looks like you're going to be about the 3rd.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're either the 3rd or the 13th, especially we want to get to the 14th. But again, that doesn't mean that I have to be here.
Well, for
I think
voting
we
though,
want
Tim,
you
it'd be
here.
good to have you here, I
Yeah.
think. If we're voting on this, we want your name on
Craig's
it.
gonna get it, he's gotta get his chops somehow.
Okay.
But I just don't want it me to be the limiter, is what I'm saying.
fine
But yes,
with
if we
third.
can make it,
Third
either those
works for
times.
me.
3rd?
Third works for me.
Third works for
That's
me.
a
And that's a
Monday?
third,
Is
that's
that
a Monday?
It's a Monday.
Third is a Monday, yes.
Okay. And that will be 5:30 unless, was this just a fluke or?
It was
six?
just happens to be every other Wednesday for
Gotcha.
6 weeks
Okay.
kind of thing. I
Okay.
have a commitment, but I am perfectly fine that Monday at whatever time
Yeah, so
everyone's
we'll do
available.
5:30,
5:30
and will we know if we can be upstairs or?
I will check, so what I'm gonna do is check June 3rd. What I will do is I will also send an update and I will confirm prior to the agenda, just so you know. I'll say, by the way, it's gonna be
Good.
downstairs at Community Center or it's gonna be upstairs. I can do
Right.
that, but I just have to check the Community Center schedule. Just for potential my request, does any time earlier than 5:30 work for anyone for work schedules? I think it was a
I-
complication for you.
I am home on Mondays by 4 o'clock, so I
And
can
this
do
is purely
early.
out of my own convenience, so I'm sorry if it's selfish.
I can be earlier on Monday.
Yeah,
Yeah, I could absolutely be earlier
sure.
if,
I could be earlier too, that day.
Could
At least
we
for this
aim
one.
for
Yeah.
4:30?
sure.
Then
Or even
4:30?
5, 4:35, whatever.
Isn't it ad hoc Forestry committee? Are you talking to the third?
Yes.
Yes, I have a prior obligation. So here's the thing though, do I necessarily...
It's like at 3.
What was that?
I think it's at 3.
That's at 3.
Yeah. Anyway, but just if you were going to be early. there might
That
be
is
a little
true.
bit of
That's at 3:30, so now I'm actually glad that we brought that up. I have a prior obligation for another committee that I have to attend at 3:30. My next question is, do I necessarily have to be here for support for you guys to form your recommendation, or you would request it?
I would say you don't have to.
But it's
What I would say, I would think it might be good to have you there, at
Okay.
least after we've had our first kind of get it going. So your meeting will go until when? Your best guesstimate?
Some have lasted 3-4 hours.
Oh, okay, never
Oh,
mind.
my.
Oh,
Well,
So I guess would say if you can be here, fine. Otherwise, I don't think
Let
you
me talk.
have to be here.
My first thought here is let me speak with Drake. He does attend those meetings as well. Perhaps I attend that meeting. He's a city staff representative and can attend the tree committee one. At that point, whenever this one's scheduled, I can cut free and start with you guys. So let me check with him as
Yeah,
well.
I think we prefer that you're
Yeah.
here.
So let's-
We all agree to that?
Let's plan on June 3rd. If there's a major
Yeah,
obligation on
I think
Or would
Drake's
the fourth
fine.
work better for everybody?
I'm
You
sorry?
You said 3rd or 4th.
Well, the 4th is a city council meeting, so I guess that's,
I would be here.
You won't be, oh, that's right.
So
that's
Mary
right, never
can't
mind. Okay, so it's the 3rd,
I
okay.
would be-
right?
Sounds
Yeah, I
good.
would be
Right.
missing.
That's the reason I
Sorry.
didn't think
Nope,
before.
you're right, 3rd is it.
Well, unless it was early on
Yeah,
the,
that's-
I just have to depart at 7.
We'll do the 3rd,
Okay.
right? I mean,
We'll do the 3rd.
What time? What time did we say?
Time will be
4?
yet to be determined. Let me speak with Drake and see what my availability will
Okay.
be.
Yeah, but I would say 4:30 or 5,
okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna,
okay?
Okay.
But a little bit that depends on what,
Mhm.
if putting it to 5 helps us with Eric, then it'll be 5.
Okay,
If not, then we might as well do 4:30,
TBD.
yes.
Eric, you mentioned about maybe just doing a kind of a rough sketch of what, is that going to be feasible between now and then? Yeah, all right,
Now,
thank you.
Rough is somewhat subjective.
Yeah,
so,
no, well,
so
yeah.
we will see. Let me know if there's any more critiquing you would like, but that won't be an issue. Honestly, I'm just going to do a GIS overlay
Okay.
and draw a line on it.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll just do a SketchUp.
Okay, that'd be great, thank you.
And Colton, do we need anything from you as far as backing as to why we're going this route? Things that you commented, it will be in the minutes about the health of the aquatics and the weeds and such.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that evident.
Okay, so we're good with that, and then we don't need a DNR person, correct?
We don't need to because from my understanding, their involvement would be at the point of permit application.
Right.
So I think we're good. So we're all gonna meet, we're gonna try to come up with a final recommendation, our preferred, to be presented to the city council on the 18th of June.
Okay.
I don't think we need a motion for any of that or such.
I will touch base with all of you then. I'm gonna have to check with my schedule towards the end of the week, just see what time I'd be able to
Yeah,
do it. So.
yeah, but let's just plan on the 3rd at either 4:30 or 5.
Thanks for catching up on this, actually.
I'm sorry?
Use the
She
number.
reminded me of my own schedule.
Well, I mean, it's second to third. Welcome again, Anita, welcome, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much. If you have any questions, of course, you can,
and thanks for all of your great work so far.
yeah, yeah. so-
Do we need to, future agenda, do I need to ask now to put that
RLIA.
on that same meeting?
I think we should,
Good, okay.
Yes.
So consider it asked,
yes.
Yeah, I think it
and I will let them know it's likely, but TBD time.
Yes.
Okay.
And we can, yeah, I like to let those people talk first, and because we might go till this time also. Right, Cole? You got to drive where to where? Mazzamini?
I'm going back to Watertown.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
It's not snowing,
Not too
so.
What's it?
All right, so if not, meeting is adjourned at 8:40.
Thank you.